What if I told you that bathing was considered a dangerous act of rebellion in medieval cities? Picture this, the bustling metropolis where the scent of unwashed bodies mingles with the stench of rancid waste, where the streets ooze filth and the air vibrates with a cacophony of disease. Would you dare to tread there? Medieval city life wasn't a quaint charm of days gone by, it was a grotesque spectacle, a carnival of horrors draped in the tattered cloth of societal norms. Garbage doesn't merely collect, it festers, a living testament to a world that thrived on decay. Rats? Oh, they were the true aristocrats, scurrying through the shadows with a glint of superiority in their eyes, feasting on the remnants of a populace too busy to care. Every corner turned reveals a new nightmare, a public latrine overflowing, a marketplace where butchered meat lies exposed to the elements, swarmed by flies that might as well be the town's official mascot. Dare to venture deeper? A tavern awaits. It promises warmth but delivers a punch of mildew that wraps around you like a noose. Patrons huddled over their mugs of ale, laughter bubbles up, obscuring the reality that each frothy sip likely harbors a cocktail of microbes, and who knows what else, swimming merrily in stale beer. The bartender, a grizzled figure with a toothless grin, offers you a drink. Cheers to your imminent demise. The truth? Hygiene was a luxury reserved for the affluent, those who could afford to ignore the chaos surrounding them. And this is where it gets darkly humorous, the very act of washing yourself was often viewed as a harbinger of disease. Bathwater, a repugnant broth of filth, was reused until it resembled a witch's cauldron more than a cleansing ritual. Want fresh water? Pray your well isn't contaminated by the leavings of your neighbors, because who needs sanitation when you have community? But wait, there's more. Step beyond the filth and into the eerie glow of medieval superstitions. The people believed in dragons and demons lurking in the shadows. The real monsters, however, were the ones they shared their cities with. The grim spectre of the Black Death loomed like a vulture, ready to feast on the unsuspecting. Plague doctors, with their grotesque masks stuffed with herbs, didn't offer hope, they were a macabre reminder that death was the only certainty. What about love? Romance thrived in this cesspool of despair. Imagine wooing your sweetheart amidst the stench of rot and the cries of the desperate. Will you be mine, you'd ask, as the odor of boiled cabbage wafts through the air. Nothing says forever like a shared infection. Medieval life was an absurdity, a grotesque ballet of joy and suffering, a paradox of existence where survival clashed with the stench of mortality. The stakes? High. The rewards? Elusive. Do you still desire to know what life was like behind the walls of those bustling cities? Or will you turn back, leaving the mystery unsolved, the stench lingering like an unanswered prayer? The choice is yours, but beware, the truth may be more revolting than you can bear. The crack of thunder above the city was a promise, an ominous whisper that something was about to break. A storm loomed, dark clouds heavy like unspoken fears, pressing down on the crowded streets. I stood at the edge of the sidewalk, heart pounding, pulse quickening with the frenetic energy around me. People surged past, faces blurring, eyes glazed in the haze of exhaustion, desperation, or something deeper. I remember the scent of sweat mingling with the sweet decay of refuse, a pungent reminder of life on the edge of collapse. We were living in the belly of a beast, and it was hungry. Across the street, a thin figure caught my eye, Anina, her hair wild like a storm itself. She was shouting, her voice lost in the cacophony of honking cars and shuffling feet. Move! Just move! Panic rippled through the crowd, a wave of uncertainty. I could see the fear etched on her face, the determination battling with despair. In a city where survival was a daily gamble, she was a wildfire, igniting every heart that dared to feel. I remember the way her words grabbed hold of me, pulling me into her storm. Then there was Marco, standing rigid against a lamppost, the shadows draping him like a funeral shroud. He was a street artist, crafting beauty from chaos, but even his paintbrush quivered today. I could see it in his eyes, loss. The storefronts around us were fading, their neon signs flickering like dying stars, and the city was consuming him whole. It's not just the buildings, he muttered, almost to himself. It's the people, all those faces. They don't see what's happening. I felt the weight of his words, heavy like the air before a storm, thick with unfulfilled dreams. The tension in the air was electric, a palpable force that set my skin on fire. The population had exploded, bloated like a balloon on the verge of bursting. Families crammed into tiny apartments, children playing in the streets, laughter rising like smoke, but there were cracks in the veneer. The smell of unwashed bodies and desperation permeated the alleys. I remember the night I stumbled upon a mother cradling her child, their eyes wide and hungry, a tableau of despair that haunted my sleep. How do you explain to a child that dreams can vanish in the blink of an eye, like the flicker of a streetlight? Nina's voice cut through the fog of my thoughts, sharp and clear. We can't keep pretending everything is fine. Look around. She gestured wildly, her arms a frantic windmill against the backdrop of crumbling walls and flickering lights. I felt her desperation wrap around me, suffocating yet liberating. Each word she spoke clawed at the corners of my heart, demanding attention, demanding action. There are too many of us. Too many, and not enough space. Not enough food. Not enough hope. And in that moment, I saw the truth. The city was a living organism, pulsating with life, but it was also choking on its own excess. The shadows lengthened, creeping closer, whispering of resentment and rage. I remembered my own childhood, the laughter that echoed down these very streets before the city became a claustrophobic cage, a labyrinth of concrete and despair. Marco's art had once brought light to the darkness. Now, it felt like a ghost haunting the cracks of a city that had forgotten its own spirit. I stepped closer to Nina. The storm above rumbled, a warning that echoed in my bones. What do we do? The question slipped from my lips, fragile like a feather floating through stormy skies. She turned to me, her eyes blazing with a fierce determination that ignited a spark within my chest. We fight. We fight for the heart of this city, for every soul that's been swallowed whole. But how do you fight a beast that feeds on its own? The very streets that had birthed us now clawed at our heels. The city was a churning cauldron, and we were both the ingredients and the byproducts, simmering in the heat of our own creation. I could feel the conflict stirring within me, a fear grappling with hope, despair wrestling with determination. Each heartbeat echoed like a war drum. As the storm broke overhead, the winds howled, a fierce testament to the chaos below. Rain pelted down, a sheet of water that washed away the filth and sorrow, if only for a moment. But even as I reveled in the coolness against my skin, I knew it was only a bandage over a festering wound. People darted for cover, their faces a mix of terror and exhilaration. The city was alive, yet so painfully aware of its own mortality. In the midst of the tempest, Marco began to paint, his brush strokes wild and frenetic, each movement a cry against the drowning silence. Look, he shouted, voice rising above the thrumming rain. We can't be erased. This city is us. He was painting not just on the canvas but on the hearts of those who dared to watch. I felt a shiver run down my spine, a call to arms to reclaim our place, to breathe life back into the shadows. And there we stood, three souls wrapped in the fabric of this urban tapestry, Nina, fierce and unyielding, Marco, restless and raw, and me, caught in the middle, searching for the courage buried deep like ancient roots in the concrete. The storm may have rattled the city, yet it also unleashed something primal within us, an urge to rise, to fight, to scream against the suffocating silence that threatened to drown us all. The rain became our anthem, the thunder our battle cry. The shadows of uncertainty lingered, but in that moment, in the heart of the storm, we ignited a flicker of hope, fragile yet defiant, an explosion of voices in a city that had almost forgotten how to listen. The echoes of our cries blended with the roar of the storm, a symphony of struggle against a tide that threatened to consume us whole. But the battle was far from over. The city still loomed large, a titan of steel and glass, its heart beating faster with every passing second. I could sense the storm clouds gathering, shadows deepening. The cries for change had begun, but the fight had only just begun. And as I stood there, rain-soaked and breathless, I felt the weight of our shared struggle, the enormity of our hope and the spectre of our fears. The urban explosion had begun, but it was only the first rumble of a deeper, more profound quake yet to come. The air hung thick, a miasma of sweat and desperation wrapping around the cramped streets like a shroud. I stood there, surrounded by the thrumming heartbeat of the city, the relentless pulse of humanity crammed into every cobbled corner. More, always more, it seemed to chant, each footfall a prayer for sustenance, for survival. The clamoring voices echoed around me, rising to a fever pitch, a cacophony of need. They were shadows cast against the walls of history, flickering in and out of existence as they clutched their children, their dreams, their very lives. I remember the day it began, an ordinary morning that spiraled into chaos. The butcher's stall had been packed tighter than a sardine can, the air heavy with the scent of blood and something more primal, something like fear. The townsfolk jostled for scraps, their eyes wild with the hunger that had gripped us all. I could see it in the hollow cheeks of young Eleanor, her ribs protruding like the ribs of a shipwrecked sailor, lost at sea. "I can't," she pleaded as she reached for a piece of offal that was already claimed by the clamoring horde, her small hands shaking. It was a struggle, a war fought on the front lines of hunger and desperation. And then there was old Tom, the blacksmith, his once strong hands now trembling as he forged metal beneath a sun that seemed to mock his labor, relentless in its heat. He had whispered to me once, "With every new face that comes to our gates, I feel the iron of my anvil grow heavier." His voice cracked like the leather of an ancient tome. The city's growth felt like a cruel joke, an insatiable beast with an appetite that could never be sated. The streets were filled with the echoes of laughter and the cries of babies, but beneath it all, I sensed the ominous tremor of a fracture waiting to split the very ground beneath our feet. Food became a currency more valuable than gold. To eat or not to eat, I chuckled darkly to myself, that is the question. I laughed not out of joy but from the absurdity of it all. I remember the time I traded my last loaf for a handful of stale bread. Stale? What is time to a starving man? I thought, biting into the dry crust, feeling the crumbs settle like dust in the pit of my stomach. But the tension was building, and the air crackled with it. Each day, new faces entered the city, travelers, exiles, dreamers. They came in search of something greater, but what they found was a city already teetering on the edge. I felt the weight of their dreams pressing down on me, squeezing the breath from my lungs. What did they think they would find here? I wondered as I watched them struggle to acclimate, their illusions devoured by the reality of overcrowded streets and empty bellies. And then there was the plague, an unwelcome guest that made the already tight quarters feel like a noose. I could feel it creeping in, like a ghost that whispered through the alleyways, leaving a chill in its wake. I remember the day the first body was found, slumped against the wall of the tavern, eyes vacant and cold. The city held its breath, a collective gasp, as the realization sunk in. Death knew no boundaries, it wove through our lives like a serpent, tightening its grip, reminding us that we were fragile creatures, teetering on the brink of oblivion. I sought solace in my memories, the laughter of my youth and the warmth of long-forgotten feasts. I found myself staring into the distance, the cosmos a vast expanse above me, a stark contrast to the decay of our city. What are we but flickers of light? I mused, dancing against the backdrop of an indifferent universe. But flickers can extinguish, and I felt the shadow of despair creeping forward, swallowing the brilliance of those memories. More, always more, the city screamed as it birthed a new wave of inhabitants, each one a drop in an overflowing chalice. I watched as resources dwindled, the market stripped bare, shelves that once gleamed with fresh produce now resembling the bones of a long-dead beast. "A feast for kings," I muttered, gesturing to the empty stalls that had once offered abundance. The irony was suffocating, and I felt my heart racing, not from the thrill of survival, but from the dread of what was to come. Eleanor, she was my anchor in this storm. I remember her laughter, a sound so pure it felt like sunlight breaking through the darkest of clouds. But the shadows of starvation loomed larger day by day, and I could see the light in her eyes dimming. Each time I watched her scavenging for scraps, I felt a piece of my soul crumble away. "I can't do this," I whispered into the void, the despair clawing at my throat, choking me. Old Tom had become a ghost of his former self, a figure hunched over his anvil, the fire in his forge flickering like hope itself, waning with each passing day. I could see the despair etched into his face, lines deepening as he crafted weapons instead of tools, preparing for a war that felt inevitable. "We cannot keep living like this," he rasped one evening, and I sensed he spoke not only of the city's future but of our very existence. His words haunted me, echoing in the chambers of my mind like a death knell. In the shadow of the city walls, where once there was laughter, now only silence reigned. The weight of unshed tears hung heavy in the air, a haunting reminder of what we had lost. I stood at the precipice, the edge of a decision that felt larger than life itself. The clash of swords rang out in the distance, an omen of conflict as palpable as the dread that filled my heart. And just like that, I felt the walls closing in, a noose tightening around our collective throat. The night deepened, the stars flickering like distant memories of better days, and I knew the confrontation was coming. With each heartbeat, the city strained against its seams, ready to burst, to erupt, to lay bare the raw, bleeding heart of humanity. I could taste the tension in the air, thick and acrid like smoke from a burning ember. I remember thinking it must be what it feels like to stand in the eye of a storm, a calm before the chaos, a desperate yearning for release. And as the shadows lengthened, I felt the weight of the world upon my shoulders, the desperation of the streets merging with my own heartbeats. I was a part of this city, its cries echoing in my veins. More, always more, it beckoned, and I stood on the edge, teetering between hope and despair, waiting for the inevitable clash between survival and surrender, love and loss. The night hummed with anticipation, a deep breath drawn before the plunge. I held on to Eleanor's laughter, Tom's fire, and my own fragile dreams. The darkness loomed, but within it, I sensed a flicker, the relentless, undying will to survive. The stench of rot was an uninvited guest, lingering in the air like a thick fog that clung to skin and soul. I stood paralyzed, eyes sweeping over the grimy streets, where refuse mingled with remnants of life, discarded memories wrapped in rags of desperation. The sun hung low, a haunting orange or barely piercing through the haze of decay. Flies buzzed around, a swirling frenzy of black that made my skin crawl. They were drawn to the filth, just as we were drawn into this nightmare, hearts beating wildly with the rhythm of fear. I remember the girl. Her name was Elara, though she wore her name like a shroud, cloaked in dirt and shadows. Her eyes, once bright with dreams, were now sunken pools of despair. I'd watched her pick through the trash, her small hands trembling as she searched for something, anything, that might fill her stomach or her spirit. I felt the weight of her silence, the unspoken words hanging in the air like a ghost. Just a scrap, she whispered to herself, a mantra of hope tinged with resignation. Each item she unearthed, a moldy piece of bread, a broken toy, was both a treasure and a tragedy. In that moment, I wasn't just an observer, I was complicit in this horror, my heart an unwilling participant in the echo of her suffering. And then there was Marco, slumped against the wall, a man worn by the years and the unseen battles that clawed at his mind. He was a spectre of what could have been, once a father, a husband, now reduced to a silhouette etched in grime. His laughter had been lost to the shadows, a ghost that wandered through the alleys, searching for a flicker of joy in a world that had turned its back. "You hear that?" he'd say, his voice a gravelly whisper. "That's the sound of hope dying." I could see the truth in his eyes, a depth of sorrow that felt like a chasm. The city had swallowed his dreams, a beast with an insatiable appetite for despair, and he was powerless to escape its jaws. I remember the day the water ran thick and brown, a foul river coursing through the streets, bringing with it a wave of sickness. It was like a cruel joke, the very essence of life turned into a weapon against us. People stood at their doorways, clutching their children, eyes wide with terror. The cries of the sick echoed through the streets, haunting melodies that twisted into the very fabric of the air. "What have we done?" someone shouted, their voice cracking like the fragile sanity of the crowd. I wanted to scream too, to rage against the injustice, but all that emerged was a hollow whisper, a plea swallowed by the suffocating muck. Reflections of desperation danced in the puddles, warped images of the lives we once led, mirrors of dreams now broken. I could feel the weight of the earth pressing down on us, as if the ground itself mourned the loss of human dignity. Every step I took was a reminder that I was walking on the remains of hope, crumbling beneath the weight of neglect. In that moment, I longed to reach out, to touch the hearts of those around me, to ignite a flicker of courage in the darkness. But I was paralyzed, ensnared by the fear that had become a second skin. "Do you remember the last time we laughed?" Elara asked, her voice a fragile thread in the chaotic noise surrounding us. I wanted to remember. I wanted to grasp onto that glimmer of joy amidst the despair. I remember, I replied, the words tasting bitter as they left my lips. It was a distant memory, a flicker of light in a world engulfed by shadows. It was a long time ago. Her eyes searched mine, a silent plea for connection, for the remnants of a shared humanity. We both knew that laughter felt like a ghost now, a figment of a past we could barely grasp. And then it happened, the moment that shattered our fragile reality. A scream pierced the air, raw and visceral, cutting through the suffocating silence. A woman collapsed in the street, clutching her stomach, her body convulsing as if the very earth beneath her was rebelling against her existence. I felt time freeze, the world narrowing to that singular moment, heartbeats drumming a frantic tempo. Marco rushed forward, urgency igniting in his eyes. "Help her," he shouted, desperation lacing his voice. But who was there to help? The crowd stood still, a tableau of horror and helplessness, frozen in place as we watched the slow unraveling of life. I closed my eyes, blocking out the sight but not the sound, the terrible, haunting sound of hope gasping its last breath. I could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on my chest, a crushing force that threatened to suffocate me. All around, the city slumbered in its filth, oblivious to the suffering it perpetuated. And yet, I felt a flicker of defiance rise within me, a tiny spark igniting against the overwhelming darkness. As the moans of the dying echoed in my ears, I thought of Ilara, of Marco, of the countless souls ensnared in this web of despair. The water was stained with more than just dirt, it carried the burden of neglect, the weight of despair stamped on its surface. But perhaps, just perhaps, the air could still be filled with laughter again. I clenched my fists, determination rising within me like a tide. I would not let this be the end. I would fight, even if it felt like swimming against a current that threatened to drag me under. Around us, shadows flickered, whispers of a world yet to be reclaimed. I could feel the heartbeat of the city beneath my feet, a pulse that resonated with the forgotten dreams of those who had come before us. This was a moment of reckoning, a collision of lives intertwined in a desperate dance against the darkness. And together we would rise, for there was strength in our suffering, a bond forged in the flames of adversity that could not be easily extinguished. I remember the girl, the man, the screams, each a thread in the tapestry of our existence, braided together by our shared struggle. The road ahead was shrouded in uncertainty, but as I looked into their eyes, I saw a flicker of hope amidst the chaos, a commitment to rise from the ashes of despair. The battle for our humanity was just beginning, and I was ready to fight. The stench hit first, a nauseating wave that curled around my throat like a noose, tightening each time I inhaled. It was the kind of smell that clung to your skin, a perverse perfume of rotten despair. I stood at the edge of the landfill, watching the mountains of refuse rise like grotesque monuments to apathy. Flies danced in a chaotic swarm, a black cloud of buzzing insatiability. Each flap of their wings whispered the same cruel truth: this was not just waste, this was a haunting reminder of neglect. And there, knee-deep in the muck, was Samira. Her hands, caked with dirt and despair, sifted through the detritus of the city, disposable cups, tattered clothes, broken dreams, all buried beneath layers of human disregard. I watched her, desperate to find something, anything, that could offer a shred of hope. She was all heart, that girl, yet the reality of her existence gnawed at her spirit, her hopeful eyes growing weary with each passing day. Yet, even as she dug, she smiled, her laughter bubbling up like a rare treasure from the depths of despair. "You wouldn't believe what people throw away," she said, holding aloft a cracked ceramic vase as if it were the Hope Diamond. "Treasure, I tell you." But the laughter never quite reached her eyes, which flickered with shadows of doubt. "We can't keep living like this," she murmured one evening, her voice barely breaking through the silence, punctuated only by the distant echo of a siren. The city had grown indifferent, a sprawling mass of concrete and chaos, and she was its unwitting voice of reason. Through her, I felt the weight of every discarded object, every ounce of negligence. I wanted to scream, to shake the city awake, but how do you ignite a spark in a heart that's grown cold? Then there was Malik, the man who lived at the edge of the landfill, his life a constant struggle against the tide of filth. His home was a makeshift shack, cobbled together from scraps of metal and wood, each board telling a story of perseverance. His hands were scarred from years of labor, a testament to his unwillingness to succumb to the despair that loomed over us like a dark cloud. "It's more than just waste," he often said, his eyes narrowing with the intensity of a man who had seen too much. "It's our future, our children's future." I found him one morning, staring into the distance, as if searching for answers in the horizon that stretched endlessly before him. The sun hung low, casting long shadows that danced over the rubble, and for a fleeting moment, I thought I saw a glimmer of hope in his eyes. But it flickered away, replaced by the all-too-familiar ache of resignation. "You can't fight City Hall," he told me, his voice heavy with defeat. "They don't care about us." Each day blurred into the next, a relentless cycle of collecting and sorting, dreams tangled within the refuse of others. We were picking through the remnants of lives discarded as if they were simply trash. Yet here we were, sifting through the wreckage, searching for meaning in the madness. I would watch Samira and Malik, their fierce spirits battling against a tide of hopelessness, and feel the weight of my own inaction pressing down on my chest. I remember when this place held promise, I whispered to the wind, almost expecting it to carry my words to the city's cold heart. There was a night when we gathered around a small fire, the soft crackle of burning debris mingling with the distant wail of sirens. The flame flickered, illuminating the lines of worry etched into Samira's face. "What happens when we run out of room?" she asked, her voice trembling as if it might shatter the stillness. "What happens when there's nowhere left to throw away our filth?" Malik's response was a haunting silence, the weight of the question wrapping around us like a suffocating shroud. The shadows cast by the fire seemed to grow taller, reaching out as if to grasp the truth we were all trying to avoid. I could feel my heart racing, the fear of a future that seemed all but sealed in this cycle of neglect. Day by day, the city continued its indifferent march, oblivious to the lives buried beneath the layers of waste. I remembered the headlines, the reports of disease outbreaks, the children's faces, pale, sickly, lost. I could see the ghosts of what could have been dancing in the edges of my mind, slim figures that flickered like candle flames, ever elusive. How long before we become ghosts ourselves? I asked into the dark, half hoping someone would answer, half dreading the truth that lay unspoken. Malik's eyes met mine, a shared understanding shimmering in the space between us. "We must make them listen," he said, a fire igniting within him that seemed to mirror the one before us. "We owe it to them." In that moment, something shifted. The silence roared with possibility, a cacophony of voices long stifled. And so, we began to plan. We would gather the stories, the faces, the truths that lay beneath the refuse of our existence. We would not be silenced. As the echoes of our resolve filled the air, I felt the weight of my inadequacy begin to lift, if only slightly. Each heartbeat pulsed with a renewed sense of purpose, a determination that surged like a river breaking through a dam. Yet the city loomed around us, an imposing giant with its back turned, unaware of the storm brewing at its feet. I thought of the children, their laughter muffled beneath the layers of grime, the future suffocating under the weight of our negligence. I remembered the urgency of the moment, the call for change that echoed in our hearts, and I knew this was just the beginning. I shivered, the wind biting against my skin, a reminder that we were still here, still fighting, still alive amid the decay. And as the night deepened, we forged ahead, armed with our stories and our scars, ready to challenge the darkness that threatened to swallow us whole. The city may have closed its eyes, but we would not let it forget us. Every heartbeat would echo our truth, raw, relentless, and unforgettable. The stench hung in the air like a dark fog, relentless and suffocating. I stood there, heart pounding, as the sun slipped beneath the horizon, leaving the village shrouded in a twilight gloom. Around me, the shadows of crumbling privies loomed, grotesque silhouettes of humanity's neglect. This wasn't just waste, it was a monument to our failures, our arrogance, our denial that we are anything but animals, squatting in the mud of our own making. I remember Clara, her face pale, eyes wide with terror. Just yesterday, she had laughed, a sweet, melodic sound that felt like a balm against the harsh reality of our lives. Now, as she peered into the pit that had claimed another child, I saw the flicker of despair, a haunting reflection of the very ground we tread upon. "It's not safe," she whispered, her voice trembling with a mix of fear and anger. "Not anymore." But what was safety? I felt the tremors of my own heart, the echo of the truth that we all tried so hard to ignore. The village elders still clung to the old ways, insisting that the waste was a part of life, just as the chicken scratched at the dirt, just as we scratched at our own souls, seeking something pure in a world of filth. But I knew better. I had seen the sickness creep through our children, the way it stole their laughter and left behind hollow shells. Frank stumbled toward us, the weight of the world etched into his brow. He had always been a gentle giant, a man who thought kindness could shield us from the horror of what lay beneath our feet. But the kindness had faltered, twisted into something desperate. "We can't keep ignoring it," he said, voice cracking as if the very words were breaking him from the inside. "Those pits, they're a curse." And yet, even as we stood there, frozen in the moment, a part of me quaked with rage. Who were we but the architects of our demise? I could almost hear the mocking laughter of the ghosts that lingered, spirits of those who had suffered before us, trapped in this cycle of ignorance. What will they say? I thought, a dark humor curling in my chest. The proud villagers who bathe once a year, who find romance in the earthy scent of decay. But darkness had a way of creeping closer, wrapping around us like the tendrils of the mist that rolled over the fields. I could feel it, the weight of despair growing heavier with each breath. I remembered the stories whispered by the fire, tales of brave souls who fought against the muck, the filth, the rot. But bravery felt like a cruel joke in that moment, a faded memory of a time when hope still felt tangible. The night pressed in, thicker now. I felt the chill of the earth beneath my feet, the cold sweat of dread pooling in my palms. Clara's eyes darted, searching for something, anything, to cling to. "The church," she said suddenly, her voice a fragile thread. "They have to know. They can't just," but Frank shook his head. "You know what they'll say. They'll dismiss us. This is how it's always been." His words hung in the air, a bitter reminder of our own impotence. The pit might swallow our cries, but the church's silence would drown us all. I wanted to scream, to shake them until they understood that this was bigger than pride, bigger than the whispers of the past that chained us down. "We're dying, Frank!" I yelled, the desperation clawing at my throat. "Dying in this filth. Don't you see?" Clara stepped back, her face drawn tight. "And what will you do? Fight the tide? The elders will call you mad." Her voice trembled, and for a moment, I saw the flicker of doubt in her eyes, doubt that mirrored my own. But it wasn't madness, it was clarity. The pit was a grave, not just for the bodies it consumed but for the very spirit of our village. "Then let them call me mad," I shouted into the night, feeling the words tear from my throat like a wild beast unleashed. "Let them. I refuse to let this place become a tomb for our children." But my resolve felt fragile, the darkness wrapping around my heart like a noose. I could feel the weight of every life lost pressing down upon me, an unbearable burden. The children, those innocent souls, did they not deserve better? Their laughter, once bright, now haunted my dreams, twisted into cries echoing through the night. I turned away from Clara and Frank, stepping closer to the pit, the stench hitting me like a slap. My heart raced, a drumbeat of fear and fury. I felt the earth beneath me, pulsing, alive with the anguish of our neglect. "What have we done?" I whispered into the void, the words swallowed by the darkness. And then, a spark, a flicker of hope ignited in my chest. It was absurd, a mad thought, but it flared, bright and fierce. Perhaps we could gather the courage, strip the veils of complacency from our eyes. Perhaps we could confront the elders, shake them from their stupor. Perhaps we could change the very fabric of our existence. I turned back to Clara and Frank, my heart racing, anticipation surging through my veins. "We do this together," I said, a newfound strength threading through my words. "We are not alone, no matter how heavy the darkness feels." The moment hung in the air, pregnant with possibility, as we stood on the precipice of something monumental. Our hearts beat in unison, a rhythmic rebellion against the despair that had gripped us too long. The night loomed large, but we were ready to face it, ready to confront the truths buried in the pit, ready to fight for the laughter of our children, ready to reclaim our humanity from the brink of decay. As the shadows danced around us, I could feel the pulse of forgotten souls, echoing in the silence, urging us forward. This was our moment. The confrontation was imminent, closer than the very breath we took. Together we would rise against the tide, against the darkness, against the pits, against the curse that had haunted us for far too long. And the night stretched on, an eternal promise of what lay ahead, a battle between hope and despair, a reckoning hidden in the shadows, waiting for the first light of dawn to break free from the darkness. The stench was palpable, a suffocating miasma that clawed its way into nostrils and threatened to root itself in the very marrow of their bones. Shadows danced along the alley walls, flickering in the dim light, as though the ghosts of the city's past whispered forgotten secrets through the suffocating air. A narrow path led them deeper into the belly of a broken world, where the ground pulsed with the weight of history heavy with dreams turned nightmares. I remember the first moment I stumbled upon it, the cesspool. My heart raced, a frantic drum in my chest, as I stood at the mouth of the dark abyss. It yawned open like a wound, a festering scar on the skin of the earth. The echoes of laughter from children playing nearby collided violently with the grim reality of that putrid hole. In that moment, the dichotomy was unbearable, innocence tainted by decay. I felt a chill crawl up my spine, a stark reminder that life could be a fragile thread, easily severed. Elena, my neighbor, was there too, her eyes wide with a mixture of curiosity and dread. She was the kind of woman who could light up a room, but in moments like these, shadows clung to her, twisting her bright spirit into something darker. "Why do we allow this?" she whispered, her voice barely breaking through the oppressive silence. I could see the flicker of fear in her gaze, the same fear that haunted her dreams, children lost to unseen horrors, sickness slipping through the cracks of their carefree lives. She had already lost one child. I remember her words, "There's an illness in the air." Each syllable was a shuddering prayer, a plea to God or fate, or perhaps just to the universe that felt indifferent to their suffering. Every heartbeat echoed the dread that clung like fog, thick and suffocating. As we stood there, the ground beneath us felt alive, a throbbing pulse of decay. I could smell the rot, a scent that wrapped around me in a suffocating embrace, promising death and despair. I was drawn to it, like a moth to a flame, or perhaps more like a soul to a grave. "This isn't just waste," I murmured to Elena, my voice trembling with the weight of unspoken truths. "This is a poison, a silent killer." The cesspool was an unholy pit, a monument to neglect and apathy, a cruel reminder of what happens when we turn our backs on our own humanity. It was a breeding ground for unseen terrors, diseases lurking in the shadows, waiting for the opportunity to pounce on unsuspecting lives. I could almost hear them whispering, their voices a chilling chorus of anguish. "What are we doing?" I asked, the desperation clawing at me. "We're letting this fester." Hours melted like candle wax, the sun dipping below the horizon and leaving behind an ink-black void filled with endless possibilities and untold horrors. As the darkness crept in, urgency settled in my chest, a gnawing dread that I couldn't shake. I watched as the streetlights flickered on, casting eerie shadows where monsters could easily hide. There was Thomas. I could see him from where I stood, his hands calloused, eyes haunted, a man burdened by the weight of his own existence. He had a family too, a wife who loved him fiercely, who spent sleepless nights worrying about the air they breathed, the water they drank. He was a skeptic, the kind of man who clung to logic even when the absurdities of life collided with his reality. "This is all a hoax," he had said, waving a hand dismissively one evening as we gathered around the flickering glow of a fire, the weight of the cesspool's stench hanging in the air like an unwanted guest. But tonight was different. I watched as he bent down, reaching a hesitant hand toward the edge of the cesspool, his brow furrowed with both determination and dread. "If we don't act, if we don't rise against this, we're all doomed," he muttered, each word laced with an urgency that felt almost like a prophecy. The fear that danced in his eyes mirrored my own, a reflection of the torment we all felt but dared not vocalize. I remember the sound of the children's laughter drifting closer, a bittersweet reminder of innocence that was being choked by the very filth we ignored. Their carefree giggles clashed violently with the reality of disease lurking in the shadows of our ignorance. I could see Elena's expression shift, from curiosity to unyielding determination. "No more," she breathed, her voice a whisper of steel. "We can't let this define us." The night pressed in around us, suffocating and thick, as we stood at the brink of confrontation. The cesspool loomed ahead, a grotesque reminder of our failures, a symbol of neglect that had been allowed to grow, fester, and breed despair. It wasn't just about the waste, it was about us, about our humanity eroding. I could feel the weight of history pressing down on us, the echoes of those who had come before, all the lives that had been lost to indifference. In that moment, with the weight of the cesspool hanging between us, the world contracted into a singularity of emotion, a raw, primal tension that tied us together. I knew then that we had to face the darkness that coiled around us, to rise and fight against the tide of decay that threatened to swallow us whole. And as the night stretched on, uncertainty loomed like a spectre, and the battle between hope and despair raged within our hearts. Elena reached for my hand, squeezing it tightly, a promise forged in the depths of fear. And I felt the spark of something burning fiercely in the depths of our souls, an unquenchable fire that could either consume us or lead us toward salvation. The shadows grew long, and I could hear the distant echoes of laughter, mingling with the whispers of the ghosts that haunted this forsaken place. Time felt suspended, the cosmos swirling in a dark dance around us. We were all connected, bound by the cesspool, by the stench of neglect, by the fear that lurked just beneath the surface. And as I prepared to step into that darkness, I knew in my heart we were not just fighting for ourselves but for every soul who had ever felt the weight of despair. The fight had begun, and the cesspool was just the beginning. The air hung heavy, thick with the scent of decay and despair, as the sun dipped below the skeletal trees, casting long shadows that swallowed the village whole. I could hear the gurgle of the river, but it wasn't the gentle lull of water, it was a hiss, a warning, something sinister. Beneath its surface, the weight of secrets roiled like a storm, churning with the filth of desperation and neglect. I remember Clara's laugh, a sound like wind chimes before a tempest. She stood at the edge of the river, her hair dancing in the evening breeze, oblivious to the lurking horrors. In that moment, she was a spirit of light in the encroaching dark, a fragile creature unaware of the poison that flowed beneath her feet. How could she not see the signs? The villagers had whispered, furtive glances shared over wooden tables, voices trembling like autumn leaves. Don't drink from the river. Don't let the children play near the wells. Yet, there she was, kneeling, cupping her hands to gather the water, her fingers brushing the surface as if it were a sacred chalice. And then there was Jonah. Oh, Jonah, with his furrowed brow and clenched fists, pacing like a caged animal. His heart was heavy, burdened by the weight of 1,000 unspoken fears. He had lost too much already, his mother to the illness that spread through the village like wildfire, his dreams to the relentless tide of despair. I watched him from a distance, a storm brewing behind his eyes, knowing he would do anything to save Clara from the fate that had snatched away those he loved. But love, I realized, can be a double-edged sword, cutting both ways with equal ferocity. Clara! Jonah's voice sliced through the silence, raw and urgent, snapping me from my reverie. I could see the desperation etched into his face, a landscape of fear and resolve. Get away from there! You don't know what it is. She looked up, surprise flickering across her features, a spark that could ignite the whole world. It's just water, Jonah. What's wrong with you? But it wasn't just water. It was the lifeblood of our existence, tainted with the remnants of forgotten lives, twisted by the hands of greed and carelessness. I could feel it in my bones, a shiver of truth that reverberated through the air like the echo of a bell tolling for the damned. The river was a grave, and every drop held a story of woe. I wanted to scream, to pull her back, but instead, I stood there, fingers trembling and heart racing. I remember the old well, how it used to sing to me in the summer, a silver voice rising from the depths, promising cool relief from the oppressive heat. Now, it was a ghost of what it had been, dilapidated, choked by weeds, its stones slick with the residue of contamination. The village had forsaken it, just as they had forsaken each other. Jonah was relentless, his love a fierce tide pushing against the shores of her foolishness. You don't understand. It's in the water, Clara. It's killing us. Can't you see? His voice cracked, a raw edge that cut through the balmy evening air, slicing the tension until it bled into the ground. And Clara, stubborn, defiant, a tempest in her own right, rose to confront him, her brow furrowed, lips pressed into a thin line. "You're being dramatic. It's just water. We need it to live." But wasn't it all connected? The wells, the rivers, the very souls of those who drank from them. I could feel it, the pulse of anguish that lay hidden in the depths. Visions of sickness danced before my eyes, children with hollow cheeks, mothers weeping, fathers lost to despair. I had seen it, felt it gnaw at the edges of my own heart, the truth that this water was a conduit, a bridge between life and death, and we were standing on the precipice. As Clara knelt, filling her hands with the murky liquid, I saw it then, a flicker of something dark beneath the surface. A shape, a shadow lurking just out of sight, slithering through the mud, taunting us with what we didn't want to acknowledge. I gasped, the air catching in my throat as the enormity of it seized me. "Clara!" I begged, my voice strangled. "Please, don't. It's not safe." But she hesitated, fingers trembling over the water, caught between trust and terror. In that fleeting moment, a heartbeat suspended in time, she looked at Jonah, searching for clarity in his stormy eyes, but all she found was fear mirrored back at her. The world around us seemed to hold its breath, waiting, watching, as if the very cosmos itself was a witness to this fragile dance of hope and desperation. And the clock ticked on. Each second echoed, a metronome of impending disaster, counting down to an unknown reckoning. Shadows crept along the banks, whispering secrets, amplifying the dread that hung heavy in our chest. I could feel the weight of history pressing down upon us, this village, these waters, intertwined with tales of loss, of love, of battles fought and futures lost. "Don't you want to know the truth?" Jonah's voice trembled, a plea mixed with fury. "Don't you want to fight for our lives? Life? Or what's left of it?" Clara shot back, and for a moment, her defiance glimmered like a blade in the dusk. "You think we can change anything?" The river gurgled with mockery, as if it understood the futility of our struggle. It was a cruel joke, a reminder that we were all trapped, tethered to this forsaken place, drinking from wells poisoned by our own hands. I felt the tears prick at my eyes, the despair clawing at my throat, a relentless tide threatening to drown us all in sorrow. I remember the moment the shadows shifted, a ripple of dread fluttering through the air. Clara's fingers danced over the water's surface, and for a heartbeat, the world stood still. The river trembled, as if it too was aware of what lay beneath, the darkness that sought to consume us whole. And then a scream, shrill and piercing, shattered the silence. Clara recoiled, the water spilling from her hands, a chalice overturned. The moment burst like a balloon, and reality crashed back in, heavy and suffocating. Jonah lunged forward, panic morphing his features into something primal, something raw. "Get away from there!" But it was too late. The river had whispered its secrets, and we were all too late to turn back. The shadows had come alive, and as Clara's eyes widened in terror, I realized we were just beginning to understand the true depths of our own fragility. The darkness was here, creeping closer, and with it came the realization that there was no escape. The well, the river, they were not just sources of life, they were mirrors reflecting our own flawed existence, beckoning us toward an uncertain fate. We stood on the edge, teetering between what we wanted to believe and the haunting reality of what we had become. The clock ticked on, relentless, and the shadows whispered their secrets, waiting for the moment when they would finally swallow us whole. The glass of water sits trembling on the counter, a clear liquid that seems to pulse with the weight of 1,000 secrets. I can barely breathe as the clatter of the city's morning rush reverberates through the thin walls of my apartment, horns blaring, footsteps pounding, the cacophony a grim reminder of the world outside. I lift the glass, the cool touch of fleeting comfort, but the moment I bring it to my lips, a shiver runs down my spine. What lies beneath this shimmering surface? I hesitate, my heart racing, a question nagging at the edges of my mind. How many ghosts swim in this water, ghosts of chemicals, of neglect, of the innocent who have sipped and suffered? I remember the day Sophia, my neighbor, strong and unyielding, like the finest steel, rushed into my apartment, her face pale, eyes wide. "The water," she gasped, "the water is poison." Her words hung in the air, heavy and stifling. The news reports played on repeat in the background, a sinister loop of warnings and statistics. lead levels off the charts. Contaminants in every drop. Each syllable felt like a hammer hitting a nail, driving home the reality we'd all tried to ignore. I looked at her, disbelief clawing at my gut. Poison? In the water? But her shaking hands told a different story. I had seen her children, Maya and Daniel, laughing in the park, their giggles a melody of innocence. Now what? Could their laughter drown out the truth? I thought of them reaching for their glasses, the sweet naivety of childhood bliss, oblivious to the looming shadows. I wanted to scream, to shake the world awake, to make them understand, this city, our city, was dying, and we were all complicit. Then there was Malik, a burly man with a heart of gold, who ran the corner store. I lingered at his counter just days later, hoping for a reprieve from the weight of Sophia's news. Malik, what do you think? I asked, the tremor in my voice betraying me. He looked up, those warm brown eyes clouded with worry. You know, I used to drink straight from the tap. Now? I don't let my kids near it. The room grew silent, the air thick with unspoken fears. He handed me a bottle of water, the label bright and misleading, promising purity. But can you trust it? I wondered. I unscrewed the cap, the sharp pop echoing like a gunshot, and took a tentative sip. The water tasted off. Something bitter lingered at the back of my throat, an unsettling reminder that we were all running out of time. I remember the nights that followed, the city alive with the hum of desperation. The skyline, once a symbol of hope, seemed like jagged teeth against the inky darkness. Shadows danced beneath flickering streetlights, whispering secrets that clawed at the edges of my sanity. I would sit on my balcony, staring out at the sprawling mass of humanity, wondering how many were oblivious, how many were sick. I felt like a ghost, a spectator to a tragedy unfolding in slow motion. The water, our lifeblood, was turning into a weapon, and we were all standing on the precipice, teetering over the abyss. Every morning, I saw Sophia, her eyes sunken, haunted by worry. I could see it in the way she clutched her children, the way she scrutinized every droplet that fell from the faucet like it was a ticking time bomb. I wanted to reach out and tell her it would be okay, but all I could manage was a nod, a silent acknowledgement of our shared dread. The laughter of her children, once a balm, had turned into a dirge, echoing in my heart like a mournful song. What would it take for us to wake up, to fight back against this invisible enemy that threatened everything we loved? As the days blurred into one another, the crisis deepened. Reports of illnesses surged, rashes, stomach aches, baffling fevers. I watched as families began to crumble under the weight of uncertainty. Malik's store, once bustling with laughter and chatter, fell silent, each customer a mere ghost of their former self. I remember the day I walked in to find him sitting on the floor, head in hands, surrounded by untouched goods. I can't do this anymore, he whispered, a broken man amidst a sea of products that promised health. There was nothing left to sell, nothing left to hope for. I felt the city shift beneath me, a tremor that echoed in my bones. Every billboard seemed to mock us, every advertisement a cruel joke. Pure water, they screamed, while reality gnawed at our sanity. I turned to my phone, scrolling through post after post, angry citizens rallying, demanding change, but it felt futile, just noise in a whirlwind that swallowed us whole. What can we do? I whispered into the void, but the void didn't answer. There was a meeting scheduled at the community center, a desperate call to arms. I remember the palpable tension in the air as we gathered, voices rising and falling like an angry tide. Sophia stood up first, her voice trembling yet fierce, holding her children close. We deserve to know the truth, she shouted, and the room erupted in applause. But deep down, I felt a weight pressing against my chest, the dread of what lay ahead. Would we be listened to? Would our cries for help echo into the void, or would they be silenced, drowned out by the very water that sustained us? As we all stood together, a band of misfits bound by fear and hope, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were caught in a haunting dance with time, each tick of the clock a reminder of our mortality, each moment slipping through our fingers like sand. The world outside kept spinning, but we were frozen, trapped in this whirlwind of despair. I looked around at the faces, the flicker of determination mingling with hopelessness, and in that moment, I understood, this was not just about water. This was about life itself, about fighting the shadows that threatened to engulf us. And so, we stood, trembling, defiant, unyielding. The glass of water still trembled on the counter, a reminder of what was at stake, of the ghosts that lurked beneath its surface, waiting for their moment to rise. The night held its breath, the city a ticking time bomb under the waning moonlight, shadowy figures slipping through alleyways like whispers of fear. I remember the smell first, the rancid stench that clawed at my throat, an acrid reminder of the refuse piling in the corners of every block. It was a living thing, this refuse, pulsating in the darkness, a silent predator waiting for the right moment to strike. I was standing there, frozen, as a rat scurried past me, its beady eyes glinting with a knowing mischief. The garbage bags lay ripped open, their contents spilling like the last vestiges of some forgotten feast, remnants of a life no one wanted to remember. I was with Lisa and Raj, two souls wrestling their own demons while trying to stave off the impending nightmare that unfolded around us. Lisa, her hair a tangled mess, her eyes haunted by a past that clung to her like the stench of decay, shoved her hands deep into her pockets. "We can't keep doing this," she murmured, her voice trembling. "Every day, it's the same. The refuse, it's not just garbage anymore. It's a warning." Raj leaned against the brick wall, arms crossed, his brow furrowed with a mix of frustration and fear. "You think the rats care about warnings?" He spat the words like venom. "They're thriving. This is their kingdom now." I watched them, felt the tremors of their fear, and it wrapped around my own heart like a noose. I remember the moment, the air thickening, time stretching, as if the universe itself was holding back a secret. The shadows seemed to shift, morphing into something grotesque, something that dared us to look away. "Maybe we should clean it up," I suggested, the words spilling out before I could think, desperate and naive like a child wishing on a star. "We could start small, small." Raj snapped, his voice an echoing thunder in the stillness. "You think small is enough? Look around. This is a war zone. We're fighting against piles of filth." The intensity of his gaze burned through the darkness, igniting the tension that simmered just beneath the surface. I felt the weight of his words, wrapping around my chest like the damp, suffocating air. The refuse was not just physical trash, it was a representation of everything we feared losing, our dignity, our lives, our hope. The first scream shattered the night like glass, a bone-chilling wail that echoed down the alley. I remember the way Lisa's body tensed beside me, her fingers clenching into fists as if trying to grasp at something unseen. "What was that?" she gasped, eyes wide with terror, darting towards the source of the sound. "Stay close," I shouted, but the words felt hollow, the panic cutting through the air like a knife. We moved as one, inching toward the shadows that loomed ahead, where the refuse danced in the dim light, a grotesque celebration of decay. Then we saw it, a figure, half hidden beneath a mound of discarded dreams and rotting memories. I couldn't breathe. The stench was unbearable, a visceral reminder that life was teetering on the edge, a fragile thread ready to snap. The figure stirred, and in the pallid light, I saw a face, gaunt, wild-eyed, a tapestry of madness woven into skin stretched too tight. "Help me!" The voice was raw, a plea for salvation wrapped in desperation. It clawed at my insides, a haunting echo of our own struggles. But the refuse was not just a physical barrier, it was an emotional chasm, a void of despair that swallowed the weak whole. Raj stepped forward, but fear held his feet like cement. "What do we do?" he whispered, his bravado fading, revealing a boy lost in the labyrinth of his own doubts. I could feel Lisa's heartbeat against my side, a frantic rhythm that matched the chaos in my mind. "We can't leave him here," I breathed, though every instinct screamed at me to run, to escape the nightmare unfolding like a dark bloom. Suddenly, the figure lurched forward, clawing at the air as if trying to grasp at the light, and the tension broke like a dam. "Get away from me!" Raj shouted, stumbling back, his voice cracking under the weight of horror. But Lisa moved with a fierce resolve, defying the crippling fear that clawed at us all. "No. We can't abandon him." Her voice rang out, a battle cry echoing against the darkness, shattering the chains of despair. "Are you insane?" Raj growled, panic spilling from his eyes. "He's just a rat in a trap, and we're the bait." I was torn, caught in the torment of indecision. I remember the echoes of my past, the faces of those I couldn't save, the suffocating darkness that blanketed everything. But Lisa's gaze pierced through me, a beacon in the haze. "We have to try," she pleaded, "for him. For us." The figure fell silent, a shuddering breath escaping his lips. Time hung suspended, thick with tension, as if the city itself was listening, holding its breath. In that moment, we stood on the precipice of something profound, a choice that would ripple through the fabric of our lives. Then the walls of refuse closed in around us, and the shadows deepened, clutching at our heels. I felt the weight of the world pressing down, the dangers of the open refuse wrapping around us like a shroud. The night was alive with the pulse of the city, and we were mere players on a stage of madness, trapped in the theater of survival. I remember the feeling, heart racing, breath caught in my throat, as hope and despair collided in a tumultuous storm within me. The alley whispered secrets, the refuse a testament to the fragility of life. But there was no denying it any longer, the dangers were real, tangible, and we were caught in the crossfire. A confrontation loomed, shadows twisting around us, and with every heartbeat, we teetered closer to the edge, where darkness and light would collide in an explosion of emotion. As I gripped Lisa's hand, the world narrowed, the refuse a distant echo, and I knew we were bound together by this moment, this haunting, this fragile thread of humanity amidst the chaos. The city would continue to breathe, to pulse, to live. But we would never be the same. A crumpled soda can lies like a flattened soldier on the sidewalk, its metallic body glinting under the harsh glare of the streetlight. I remember the sound of laughter just moments before, a child's giggle soaring above the chorus of city sounds. Then, that laughter cut through the night like glass shattering, as the child stumbled, almost tripped over the lifeless can, teetering on the edge of falling into the world of refuse, a world that can swallow innocence whole. I remember the cold dread pooling in my stomach, the way the air thickened as it wrapped around my throat. I remember the look on the mother's face, a mask of horror as she lunged forward, her heart racing, the pulse of fear echoing in her ears, drowning out the hum of city life. Littered streets are a graveyard of dreams, each piece a ghost haunting the living, every amber cigarette but a flickering memory of life extinguished. There's Marcus, standing just a few feet away, his hands shoved deep into his pockets, avoiding the scene with an air of practiced indifference. A cigarette hangs from his lips, its smoke curling upward like the despair he hides behind his bravado. He's seen too much, lived too long in a world that seems to decay around him, yet he still walks these streets, haunted by the ghosts of his own failures. "Another day in paradise," he murmurs, the sarcasm bitter on his tongue, but his eyes betraying him. They dart to the child, then back to the litter, a pile of forgotten hopes piled high like a silent scream waiting to be heard. He feels it, he knows this city is a reflection of us. It's grimy and lost, an echo of choices made and discarded. "Hey! Watch where you're going." It's Jenna, rushing past, her heels clicking sharply against the concrete, a cacophony of urgency. She's late, always late, racing against a clock that seems to mock her incessantly. The wind tousles her hair, and for a fleeting moment, she looks like a wild spirit, untamed and free. But then she notices the litter, the way it clings to her shoes like a curse, and her eyes narrow with disgust. "Ooh, can't they just clean up?" she snaps, her voice laced with frustration that cuts through the air like a knife. Yet, beneath her bravado lies a heart that beats heavy with the weight of the world. A world that has turned its back on its own. She remembers summers spent in the park, running barefoot, the grass between her toes, and now? Now that same park is a landfill where dreams go to die. Each piece of trash is a reminder of humanity's neglect, a whisper of a future choking under the weight of its own waste. I remember the stillness that follows, the eerie silence that settles like fog over the city. It's a suffocating blanket, pressing down on the shoulders of those who care, the ones who see beyond the discarded wrappers and broken glass. The air is thick with tension, each breath heavy with unspoken words. What are we doing? I want to scream, but I don't. Instead, I watch them, Marcus and Jenna, two souls caught in a tangled web of disbelief and despair. "Do you remember when this street was clean?" Marcus asks, his voice barely above a whisper, as if speaking too loudly might shatter the fragile illusion of the past. When we didn't have to dodge garbage like it was landmines. Jenna rolls her eyes, but there's a flicker of pain in her gaze. What does it matter? It's too late for all that. Too late. The words hang in the air, heavy, like a storm cloud ready to burst. I can feel it, the tension thickening, sharp enough to cut. The city is alive, pulsing with anger and frustration, and every piece of litter is a reminder of our collective failure. A fast food wrapper flutters like a wounded bird caught in a storm, the wind carrying it further into the streets, a metaphor for our own lives, carelessly tossed aside, forgotten. A siren wails in the distance, its cry echoing through the alleys, a reminder of the chaos lurking just beneath the surface. We are all human, flawed and fragile, desperately trying to navigate a world that seems hell-bent on consuming us. I can see it in their faces, the weariness etched into Marcus's skin, the frustration that tightens Jenna's jaw. We're all just trying to survive, yet this litter, this refuse, it's a constant reminder that we're losing the fight. I remember the nights when the city sang, when laughter filled the air like sweet music, but now? Now it's a dirge, a mournful melody playing on repeat, punctuated by the sound of footsteps shuffling over broken glass and crumpled paper. Marcus leans against a lamppost, his eyes glazed, staring into the distance as if searching for something that no longer exists. This is our fault, you know, he says suddenly, as if the thought has been clawing its way up from the depths of his mind. We let it happen. Jenna scoffs, but her voice wavers, betraying her. What can we do? It's too big, too broken to fix. I feel the weight of that truth, the chilling reality that stabs at my heart. The world is too big, too sprawling, yet here we are, fighting our own battles, grappling with our own demons, and all around us, the streets are heavy with refuse, metaphors for our lives, our decisions, our failures. The child finally walks away, her mother holding her close, shielding her from the world's ugliness, but it lingers in the air, festering like a wound that refuses to heal. I watch them go, a fleeting moment of hope extinguished. The laughter fades, merging into the cacophony of the city, and I'm left standing there, caught in the echo of what once was. I remember the whispers of change, the moments when we could have done something. But each of us remains trapped in our cycles, entangled in our own narratives, as the world around us crumbles under the weight of its own neglect. And as I stand there, the night thickening like a dark shroud, I realize the truth: we are all part of this refuse, this litter that clogs our streets and our souls. The confrontation looms, an emotional reckoning that's as inevitable as the dawn. It's coming, a wave of reckoning, and we will either drown in it or rise with it, clutching each other tightly as the world continues to swirl in chaos. The rancid aroma hit me like a fist, a visceral punch that stole the breath from my lungs. It wasn't just the smell of garbage, it was the scent of desperation, of lives twisted by a relentless city that swirled around us like a hungry beast. I stood frozen, the grit of the asphalt biting into my knees as I watched Sarah, her face marred with a mixture of fear and defiance, debating whether to step further into the refuse. This is our life now, she whispered, but her voice trembled, a note of disbelief slicing through the air. Life? What life? I shot back, spitting the words like venom. The question hung in the thick stench, festering, waiting to be answered. It felt like every heartbeat echoed the truth we confronted daily, a truth that was rotting, unkempt. The city's heartbeat, heavy and cruel, pulsed around us, drowning out the last vestiges of hope that still clung to my fraying sanity. I could see the shadows of the buildings towering above, leaning in with eager malice, as if they too were waiting for us to slip into the abyss. Their windows, black and hollow, reflected nothing but despair. I remembered nights spent dreaming of escape, of breathing air not tainted by decay. But dreams were fickle things, ephemeral wisps of possibility lost in the relentless grind of existence. The trash piled high around us was a grotesque monument to our failures, a testament to a collective neglect that had layered over years, trapping us in its stench. Each bag was a whisper, a memory of what could have been, lives discarded like empty bottles, the echoes of voices long silenced beneath the weight of suffocating refuse. I thought of my brother, long gone, swept into the currents of this very city, lost among the shadows. His absence clawed at my insides, a reminder of the fragility of breath, of life, of everything I had clung to. "Look!" Sarah pointed, her eyes wide with something akin to horror. A rat scurried past, its body sleek and oily, a creature that thrived in the decay, a survivor against all odds. I felt a sickening mix of admiration and revulsion. Are we like that? The question snaked its way into my mind, curling around my thoughts, squeezing tight. Were we too becoming creatures of the refuse, learning to navigate the filth, to adapt, to survive? In that moment, I saw myself mirrored in the rat's frantic dash, a desperate soul clawing through the darkness, seeking a sliver of light amid the garbage. I could hear the echoes of laughter, the clinking of glasses, nights filled with human warmth. But that warmth felt distant now, a nostalgic spectre haunting me, reminding me that the city was a labyrinth of echoes, where joy once lingered like an afterthought. "Danny, we have to keep moving," Sarah urged, her fingers curling around my wrist, grounding me in a moment of clarity. Her grip was firm, an anchor in the rising tide of despair. She was my tether, my lifeline amidst the decay, but even she bore the marks of this city, her spirit bruised, her laughter dulled, a flickering candle fighting against the gathering dark. I could see the weight of the city on her shoulders, the fear of what lay ahead, of what we might become if we didn't flee. The refuse around us was a reflection of our souls, and I feared it was too late for redemption. It was then I noticed the clock tower in the distance, its hands mocking us, ticking away moments we could never reclaim. Each tick was a reminder that time marched forward without us, indifferent to our plight, while we wallowed in the rot. "I remember," I muttered, the words spilling from my lips like a confession. "I remember when we thought we could change things, make it better. I remember when we believed." My voice cracked. I could feel the raw emotion clawing its way up my throat, threatening to consume me. "Stop it," Sarah snapped, her eyes hardening. "We can't dwell on the past. The city's already won if we do." I wanted to fight her words, wanted to scream that we were not yet defeated, that there was still time to reclaim our dreams. But I felt a shiver skitter down my spine, a chill that whispered of inevitability. She was right, and that acknowledgement settled over me like a heavy shroud. The ghosts of our past lingered, but they were no longer our guides, they were our chains. Just then, the wind shifted, carrying with it a sharper odor, a pungent, acrid scent that stung my nostrils, a warning of something sinister lurking just beyond the refuse. I looked at Sarah, panic rising in my throat, and saw the same fear reflected in her eyes. But what could we do? The city held us captive, a maw ready to swallow us whole if we dared to step away from its grip. "Do you hear it?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper above the noise around us, a cacophony of life and decay. The echoes of laughter and anger, the clattering of carts, the shouts of vendors, each sound dripped with a sense of impending doom. The city was alive, but it was a wretched, dying thing, and we were its unwilling tenants. "Danny," Sarah's voice trembled. "We can't stay here. We have to go. Now." But where? I choked on the thought. Where could we run in a city that felt like a living organism, swallowing us deeper into its belly with every step we took? Was there an escape from the smell of decay when it clung to our very souls? I remember the last time we laughed, a genuine, unburdened laugh that echoed through daylight. It felt like a lifetime ago, a fleeting moment snatched away by the shadows creeping in around us. "We can't just leave everything behind," I argued weakly, even as the stench of rot and refuse suffocated my resolve. But as I looked into Sarah's eyes, I knew we were standing at the edge of a precipice, teetering between what had been and what could never be again. I felt the stench of decay curling around my heart, squeezing tighter, as if the city was trying to pull us down into its depths. And in that moment, I felt the city breathe, a deep, shuddering breath full of ghosts and memories, of dreams left to rot among the refuse. The confrontation loomed ahead, heavy with the weight of choices unmade, of paths not taken. As the night closed in, I knew we were on the brink. We could either drown in the decay or claw our way back into the light. But the city whispered, and the smell of decay lingered, a haunting reminder that the line between life and refuse was paper thin, and the abyss was hungry. The stench hit me like a physical blow, a wall of rot and despair slamming into my senses as I stood at the crumbling edge of the alleyway. A damp fog clung to the shadows, thick and suffocating, swirling around me as if the very air held its breath, waiting for something, anything, to shift. My heart raced, pulsing erratically in my chest like a trapped animal. I was not alone, the alley whispered secrets I wished I could unhear. The echoes of gnawing hunger and decay lingered, the cries of lost souls woven into the fabric of the darkness. I remember the first time I encountered the smell. I had been younger then, naive to the ways of the world. Laughter bubbled like a stream, but it soured as I stumbled into that same alley. There, a corpse lay partially draped in a torn blanket, a pair of lifeless eyes staring into eternity. The stench wrapped around me, gripped my throat, and squeezed until I gasped for air. I remember the way the world shifted in that moment, a kaleidoscope of color turned gray, hope dissolved into dust. But now, I was back, and I was not alone. To my left, Victor, a man shaped by shadows and sorrows, stood rigid. His eyes flickered like dying embers, haunted by memories of the streets we once roamed as children. Each breath he took seemed a battle against the fetid air, a war he was losing. "It wasn't like this before," he muttered, his voice a brittle whisper barely above the rustle of the wind. "Not this bad." No, it wasn't. Back then, the alley had held a different kind of life, the kind that thrived amidst laughter and games. Now it was a mausoleum of waste, where the stench of decay was the loudest voice, drowning out any remnants of joy. I squeezed his shoulder, but my hand felt like a weight dragging us both down. "We have to move," I urged. My own words echoed with fear, a pulse of desperation. The decay seemed alive, wrapping tendrils around us, pulling us deeper into the heart of the alley, deeper into something that felt ancient, otherworldly. It was more than just the stench, it was the knowledge of loss, of dreams crushed under the weight of the mundane. "Do you remember the way it used to smell?" Victor said, eyes glossed over in nostalgia. "The flowers we picked in spring." His voice cracked, and I could see the ghosts of our childhood flicker behind his eyes, dancing in the haze of putrid air. We had believed in innocence then. We had believed in sunshine and laughter, not in the foul breath of death lurking just beyond the edges of our memories. A figure moved in the shadows, a thin man, gaunt like a wraith, face hidden under a hood. He emerged silently, a spectre conjured by the stench. His presence was a grim reminder of the bleakness surrounding us. It was as if death itself had taken residence in this alley, and he was its harbinger. I felt Victor's grip tighten on my arm, his fear palpable as the figure approached, the smell intensifying, a miasma of filth and despair. "What do you seek?" the man rasped, voice like gravel scraping against bone. The words hung in the air, heavy with an unspoken challenge, a question that demanded an answer we weren't ready to face. "Leave us," I managed to croak, but the command felt feeble against the tide of dread washing over us. He laughed, a low, mirthless sound that echoed against the brick walls like a twisted melody. "You think you can simply walk away from what you've become? You carry it with you, this stench of decay." His finger, skeletal and long, pointed towards Victor. "It seeps from your very soul." I felt the heat of anger flare within me, igniting a spark against the encroaching darkness. "We are not defined by this place. We can change." I wanted to scream, but the words felt too inadequate. I could hear the heartbeat of the alley, the rhythm of despair echoing around us, mocking my feeble attempts at hope. Victor's face paled, a flicker of understanding dawning in his eyes. He turned to me, fear etched into every line of his face. "Maybe he's right," he murmured, the weight of years and regrets crashing down upon him like a tidal wave. "Maybe we can't escape." But the notion clawed at me. I had to fight back against the suffocating grip of this place, this memory of death and decay. I shook off Victor's doubt, clenching my fists, grounding myself in the moment. "We can't just give up. We can't let this alley win." I felt the desperation rising, a fierce battle against the stench that threatened to consume us whole. The figure chuckled again, an echo of the laughter from our childhood, twisted and warped. "You believe in change, yet here you stand, fettered by the echoes of the past." His words danced like flames, flickering with a cruel light, illuminating the shadows lurking within our hearts. I looked at Victor, his eyes now clouded, searching for something to cling to. "Do you remember the day we found that old tree in the park?" I asked, grasping for any shred of hope that might still be buried beneath layers of despair. "We carved our names into it, promised that we would always be free." Freedom, it felt like a ghost now, a faded memory lost in the haze. But it was a spark I clung to as tightly as I could. "We can find that freedom again," I insisted, my voice rising above the stench, determined to drown out the suffocating memories. Then, the man stepped closer, the smell of decay swarming around him like an unholy shroud. "This isn't just about you," he hissed, and I felt the weight of his words settle over us, an oppressive blanket of fear. "You are part of this decay, a thread in the tapestry of lost dreams." In that moment, something shifted between us, a primal understanding of our shared struggle against the decay closing in. I could feel Victor's resolve hardening beside me, his spirit flickering back to life, as if ignited by the remnants of our past. Together, then, Victor whispered, a quiet declaration that reverberated through the alley, chasing shadows back into the void. "We'll find a way to rise above this." And just like that, the alley shifted, the air crackling with a renewed sense of purpose. The pervasive odors, once suffocating, transformed into a harbinger of change, a challenge waiting to be met. The ghosts of our past clung to us still, but now they felt like allies instead of enemies, urging us forward into the unknown. With every step into the darkness, I could feel the weight of decay lifting, the promise of something new and vibrant waiting just beyond the shadows. We moved together, two souls intertwined in a battle against the odds, toward a future that shimmered like distant stars against the blackened sky. The alley faded behind us, the stench dissipating into whispers as we took our first breath of freedom. The city was quiet. Too quiet. It was the kind of silence that settled like thick fog, the kind that made your heart thud loud in your ears. 1,000 footsteps echoed against the concrete and brick, but among them, something entirely unexpected loomed, a bleat, sharp and jarring, slicing through the stillness. It came from the alley where the shadows warped and twisted, a dark world where only the bravest dared tread. I remember the first time I saw them, a trio of goats, their eyes wide and wild, caught in the harsh glow of a street lamp. They were an anomaly, a breath of the pastoral in a landscape of steel and asphalt. My heart raced as I approached, fighting the urge to turn back, to retreat into the safety of my apartment and the dull comfort of my routine. Instead, I stepped closer, drawn in by their innocence, their ragged, unkempt fur that seemed to whisper stories of fields long forgotten. Simone was there too, her breath misting in the cool night air, her gaze fixed on the goats with a mix of horror and fascination. "Can you believe this?" she hissed, clenching her fists. In the heart of the city, and yet, there they stood, three frail creatures, oblivious to the chaos surrounding them, the cars racing by, the neon lights flickering like dying stars. I could see the tremble in her hands, the way she fought against the despair that crept into her thoughts. Simone was a dreamer, a journalist with fire in her belly, always chasing the next big story. But tonight, she was lost, drowning in a world that felt increasingly foreign. "I remember the stories of farmers," she said, voice trembling as if the weight of her words could shatter the world. "How they'd bring their livestock to the city, just to sell them at the market. The sounds, the smells. It was alive, full of life." The goats shifted, their heads bobbing, chewing on the remnants of discarded takeout strewn across the pavement, a cruel joke. "Life," I echoed, but the word tasted bitter on my tongue. Hadn't this place, once a thriving fusion of nature and humanity, become a graveyard of dreams? Shadows danced around us, and I felt the ghosts of the past linger, their whispers curling like tendrils of smoke. Suddenly, a faint rustling made us both turn. A man emerged from the darkness, his face obscured, but his soul carved from desperation. The stench of sweat and sorrow wafted off him, a ghost of a life he once knew, perhaps. "They don't belong here," he said, voice gravelly, like stones scraping against stone. "They're lost." His words hit hard, a punch to the gut. I saw Simone's eyes widen, the unspoken truth settling like an iron weight between us. The goats, their existence was a rebellion against the sterile, concrete landscape. They were symbols, vivid reminders of what had been sacrificed in our relentless pursuit of progress. "Why do we fight so hard to forget?" I whispered, and the words clawed their way out, raw and jagged. "Why do we let them suffer in silence?" The man stepped closer, his eyes piercing through the dim light, as if he could see the fear that coiled around our hearts. "Because we're afraid," he rasped. "Afraid of what we've lost, afraid to feel the weight of it." His gaze flicked to the goats, who had now grown restless, bleating in urgent tones that reverberated through the alley, like a warning bell. I remember the chill that ran down my spine, how it felt as though the city itself was holding its breath. I reached out, my fingers brushing against the coarse wool, feeling the warmth beneath, a heartbeat of life in the sterile coldness of urban despair. The moment shattered like glass. A siren wailed in the distance, and suddenly, the alley felt less like a sanctuary and more like a trap. The man's eyes flared with panic. "You have to go," he urged. "They can't be caught. They'll take them away." Simone hesitated, her heart and mind at war. "But they need help. We can't just leave them here." The goats began to scatter, sensing the tension, their small bodies darting into the shadows where we dared not follow. My heart thundered as I watched, feeling a visceral pull, a yearning to chase after them, to protect what little innocence remained in this cruel world. "Help them!" I shouted, my own voice drowning in the cacophony of the city. "We can't just watch." But even as I said it, I felt the grip of fear constricting around my chest, the reality crashing down like a wave. The man was right. We were afraid of confrontation, afraid of failing, afraid of the dark places this city could consume us in. Simone, her eyes glistening with unshed tears, turned to face me. "What do we do? What can we do?" And in that moment, 1,000 thoughts raced through my mind, colliding and scattering like leaves in a storm. I remembered the noise of children laughing, the joy of a sunny afternoon spent in a field filled with life, the smell of fresh hay mingling with the cool breeze. I remembered dreams of a better world, of a harmony between nature and humanity. But all that remained were echoes, fading whispers in the shadows of the city. The goats disappeared into the depths, their small silhouettes swallowed by the night. The man turned and vanished as well, leaving us alone, marooned in the silence once more. "Simone," I breathed, my voice barely above a whisper. "What have we become?" The question hung heavy, suffocating, while the city loomed around us, a monument of consequence, an oppressive weight pressing down. We stood there, caught between the fading light and the encroaching darkness, our dreams colliding with an unforgiving reality. I could feel the world shifting beneath us, the pulse of the city echoing with every heartbeat, reminding us that the goats, those lost souls, would forever remain a reminder of our own captivity. In the distance, a clock tower chimed, a haunting sound that filled the air with an impending sense of doom. Time was running out, and we were trapped in a cycle of despair and longing, forever seeking a way to bridge the chasm between the world we lived in and the one we yearned for. As I turned to leave, the shadows closed in around us, and I couldn't shake the feeling that the city itself was watching, waiting. Would we have the courage to confront the fear that lay underneath, both within us and in the world beyond? Or would we simply return to our lives, prisoners of our own making, leaving the goats to wander lost, forever searching for a place they could call home? The haunting silence answered back. From the shadows. I stood on a cracked sidewalk, knee-deep in the cacophony of a city that never slept. The low growl of a stray dog echoed through the alley, a warning, a plea. It gripped my heart, a raw sound that made me think of survival, of instinct. This night was alive, vibrating with the pulse of lives entwined, human and animal, both desperate, both searching. I remember the moment when I first saw Benny. He was a scruffy mutt, his coat peppered with dirt, eyes gleaming like coals in the darkness. He belonged to no one, yet claimed the streets like a king. I found him rummaging through a trash can, the remnant of someone's dinner spilling out like an offering to the forgotten. "Hey there, buddy," I whispered, my voice trembling with an emotion so heavy it felt as if it could shatter the night. His gaze locked onto mine, and in that instant, I saw a reflection of my own loneliness, a mirror of scars and bruises hidden beneath the facade of urban life. But life isn't just about the strays. There's Chloe, the single mother with worry lines etched into her forehead, balancing 2 kids and a job that barely pays the bills. She has a small flock of chickens in the backyard, remnants of a life that once promised more. I remember how she laughed when the rooster crowed at the crack of dawn, a sound that cascaded through the stillness of the morning. They say he's the alarm clock that crows, he's more like a living nightmare, she joked, but there was a glimmer in her eyes, a flicker of defiance against the grind of everyday survival. In the midst of the city's chaos, these animals became her lifeline. She would sit on her porch, nursing a mug of coffee, while her children chased the chickens, their laughter mingling with the rustling of feathers. Those moments felt sacred, a brief escape from the relentless clock ticking in the background, reminding us all that time is fleeting. I've got nothing but this, she would say, gesturing to her birds, but they remind me that life can still be beautiful. Yet darkness loomed, a spectre that haunted the corners of every street. I remember the night when Benny didn't come back. The alley was empty, the trash cans upright, as if they were holding their breath. The silence was deafening, a void that swallowed hope. The city transformed into a ghost town, shadows creeping along the walls, whispering tales of loss. Panic gripped my chest, twisting until it hurt. Wherever he was, I could feel his absence like an ache, a hole in the fabric of this frenetic world. Chloe felt it too. She had been growing increasingly frantic about her chickens, their numbers dwindling, and each disappearance etched deeper shadows beneath her eyes. The women in the neighborhood exchanged hushed whispers, each story tinged with fear, a fox, a stray dog, maybe even something worse. It's just the city, she murmured one night, her voice laced with resignation, it takes without asking. But at this moment, it wasn't just the animals that were lost. I could see it in Chloe's face, the way her hope flickered like a candle in the wind. I remember the way she clutched her children, fear pooling in her eyes, the weight of responsibility pressing down. I can't protect them all, she confessed, her voice breaking, heavy with anguish. What kind of mother am I? That question haunted me as I wandered the city's edges, my heart tangled in the lives of those I barely knew. I stumbled upon a lonely corner where stray cats gathered, their eyes luminous, fixated on something only they could see. They were the ghosts of the city, remnants of stories untold, lives lived in shadows. I felt a chill run down my spine, as if the very air whispered their secrets, a chorus of forgotten lives begging to be acknowledged. I remember the chill of that night, the way it wrapped around me like a shroud, the echo of Benny's bark ringing through my mind. Was it possible that the city had turned its back on them, on us? I felt the pulse of 1,000 heartbeats beneath the surface, each one a testament to survival, of battles fought in silence. We are all strays in our own way, aren't we? Navigating a world that's quick to discard, to forget. The tension hung thick, pulsating. Chloe's laughter faded, replaced by the desperate cries of her children searching for their lost pets, their innocence slipping through their fingers like sand. I stood on the precipice of despair, the weight of their pain anchoring me, a tether to reality. I could feel their tears, taste their fears, it was a bitter brew that seeped into my bones. Night after night, the city echoed with the sounds of sorrow. The stray dog's growl morphed into a low howl, a lament for those who were lost, for lives intertwined with the pulse of urban life yet cast aside. I wandered through the alleys, searching for Benny, for any sign of him in the labyrinthine paths that seemed to stretch forever. I remember the scratches on my hands as I pushed through thorny bushes, the bitter tang of hopelessness lingering on my tongue. Time slipped away, and the city transformed. Shadows danced beneath the flickering streetlights, their movements eerie yet hauntingly beautiful. The clock in the distance chimed, a grim reminder of every moment that passed without resolution. I could feel the tension coiling tighter, ready to snap, an impending confrontation looming like a thunderstorm on the horizon. And then, in the stillness, I saw him. Benny emerged from the shadows, his coat matted but his spirit unbroken. He was a ghost returned from the abyss, a mirage of hope in a desolate landscape. I fell to my knees, overwhelmed, my heart racing, our eyes locked, and in that moment, everything else faded. The city faded, the fears faded, and all that remained was the bond forged through shared struggles. Chloe's laughter broke the silence, pure, unadulterated joy that sent shivers down my spine. She had found her missing chicken, its feathers ruffled, yet alive. We stood together, two souls intertwined by our love for the forgotten, the lost, the strays that wandered through our lives. I could feel the pulse of the city around us, the heartbeat of 1,000 lives converging into one moment of sheer, unadulterated connection. But that was just the beginning. The shadows were still lurking, and the city had more secrets to unveil. The night was still young, and the echoes of our unfulfilled fears reverberated through the alleyways. In this city where life and death entwined like lovers, the story was far from over, it was just beginning. The steel door slams shut behind her, echoing through the dim corridor as Julia gasps for breath, her heart racing like a caged bird. The air, thick with the metallic scent of decay, wraps around her like a noose, tight, suffocating. She can almost taste the rot, an acrid tang that makes her stomach churn. She stumbles into the flickering light of the storage room, her mind a chaotic storm of dread and denial. The shelves loom like tombstones, crammed with packages marked with dates long past. Each one a harbinger of sickness. She remembers the last family dinner, the laughter, the warmth, the food. Oh, the food! Was it the roast? She whispers to herself, her voice a raw thread of fear. Did I feed them poison? Panic grips her, a vice tightening around her chest. The faces of her loved ones flash in her mind, each one a candle, flickering, fragile. They had trusted her, and now? Now, she feels like a monster. Footsteps echo behind her. It's Marcus, her husband. He stands in the doorway, silhouetted against the dim light. His brow furrows, and she can see the shadows of worry etched deep beneath his eyes. What have you found? His voice trembles, a taut string ready to snap. She turns to face him, and in that moment, the world around them blurs. It's just the two of them, caught in this web of fear and guilt. Meat, she croaks, the word heavy on her tongue. It's spoiled, Marcus. I didn't check. I didn't want to know. He steps closer, and the smell wafts over him, a grotesque blend of rancid flesh and despair. His face pales, and she can see the wheels turning in his mind, calculating, weighing the potential harm. Are the kids okay? His voice barely above a whisper, laced with panic. Julia's heart sinks. The children, innocent little souls, unaware of the darkness lurking in their meals. I don't know. The truth slices through her like a knife. She closes her eyes, and in that darkness, she sees them. Little Sarah, her curls bouncing as she twirls, giggling, blissful. And Kyle, curious, always asking questions, his bright eyes wide with wonder. Julia! His voice breaks through her reverie. We have to, don't you dare say it, she snaps, the urge to protect surging within her. What if it's too late? What if she can't finish the thought? The weight of it presses down, a crushing certainty that threatens to swallow her whole. The consequences of neglect loom like a spectre in the corner of her mind. They stand there, two broken pieces of a puzzle that no longer fits. The shadows creep closer as if they're being watched. The sterile glow of fluorescent lights flickers, casting eerie shadows on the walls. Remember the last time? Marcus murmurs, his voice trembling. That salad from the market? The one with the lettuce that smelled rotten. The memory slithers into her mind, a dark serpent. They had shrugged it off, a harmless mistake. But that night had ended with them both doubled over, the world dissolving into a haze of pain and regret. The kids had been spared then, but what if they weren't this time? I remember, she whispers, her voice a ghost of its former self. I remember the fear, the helplessness. It gnaws at her, a relentless beast. If they had only been more careful, if they had only taken precautions. But life is messy, chaotic. What if their negligence cost them everything? I'll call the doctor, Marcus says, the resolve in his voice igniting a spark of hope. But she can see the cracks beneath his facade, the fear pooling in the depths of his gaze. He pulls out his phone, the screen illuminating his face like a lighthouse against the storm. No, she pleads, a chill racing down her spine. What if they ask us questions? What if this is our fault? They had both seen the news reports about foodborne illnesses, the devastation that followed, the lives shattered in the blink of an eye. The thought of being scrutinized, of accusations swirling around them like vultures, is a fate worse than death. But then, a voice breaks through the haze, a whisper from the past. "Mommy, I'm hungry." It's Sarah, standing in the doorway, her small figure framed by the shadows. The innocence in her eyes pierces Julia's heart like a dagger. "Can I have a snack?" Panic boils over. "No. Stay back." She lunges forward, the instinct to protect surging through her veins. "Don't eat anything. Please?" Marcus grabs her arm, a desperate attempt to contain the chaos. "Julia, we have to calm down." They don't understand. But how could they? How could they understand the depths of betrayal swirling around the very food meant to nourish them? Another sound, a soft thud, pulls her attention away. Kyle appears, rubbing his eyes, his teddy bear clutched tightly. What's wrong? His innocence is a knife twisting in her gut. Silence envelops the room, thick and suffocating. Julia looks at her children, their small faces illuminated by the harsh light overhead. How do you explain this? How do you tell them that love, care, and the very act of feeding them could also be a weapon, a trap waiting to spring? "I'm sorry," she whispers, tears stinging her eyes, a floodgate of guilt opening within. "I'm so sorry." And in that moment, as the shadows dance around them, she realizes this isn't just about spoiled meat or contaminated produce. It's about trust, about the fragile threads that hold families together. It's about the heart-wrenching reality of existence, how every meal shared can become a haunting memory, how every choice carries with it the weight of consequence. Her heart races. The clock ticks, each second a reminder of their vulnerability. The air is thick with tension, a palpable fear pressing against her chest. They are trapped in this cycle of uncertainty, this haunting dance with fate. She can almost hear it whispering, reminding her of the fragility of life, the fine line between nourishment and destruction. "Julia?" Marcus's voice pulls her back, steady but tinged with fear. "We have to act. Now." As the darkness closes in, she knows they must confront this nightmare together, confronting the ghosts of negligence that loom over them. The shadows shift, whispering secrets of despair, but amidst it all, a flicker of hope remains. They must fight for their family, fight for the fragile bonds that could shatter at any moment. With one last breath, she steels herself. This battle is far from over. The confrontation looms, and the consequences of their choices hang in the balance, a dark cloud threatening to consume everything they hold dear. And as they step into the unknown, the echoes of their decisions ripple through the air, a haunting reminder of the weight of responsibility, the haunting call of foodborne illness, the lingering specter of spoiled meat and contaminated produce, the perilous shadow of survival. The air crackles with tension, every breath laced with the acrid scent of spoiled food, a cacophony of decay looming in the shadows. I stand in the dim light of a worn kitchen, the flickering bulb casting ghostly shapes against the cracked walls. In front of me, an open refrigerator hums its ominous tune, a metallic sigh that seems to mock the chaos around it. Bottles of expired sauces and jars of unidentifiable substances stare back, their contents a grotesque ballet of colors, greens that mold like the forest floor, reds that bleed into dark, unholy hues. A symphony of neglect screams, "Eat at your own risk." Across the room, Clara is a whirlwind of frantic energy, her face a portrait of desperation etched under the harsh glare of the light. "We can't throw it out. People are counting on us." Her voice is high, frantic, as if the very walls might crumble if she speaks any lower. She pauses, her breath catching. Her fingers tremble as she holds a jar of salsa, the lid barely clinging on, a metaphorical time bomb ticking in her hands. What if someone gets sick because we didn't act? What if, she trails off, an echo of memories flitting through her mind, sickened faces, pale and drawn, eyes haunted by food that was supposed to nurture. I remember the time we found ourselves at the charity pantry, a line of souls waiting, hungry and desperate, each face a lost story waiting to be told. How could we deny them? I had whispered to Clara, but now those words feel like knives, each one twisting painfully. I remember the way she smiled, that fierce determination lighting her eyes, igniting hope in the hearts of those who had none. But hope can be a cruel beast, and in this moment, it claws at her insides, demanding to be fed. "Everything has its time," David says from the corner, his voice low, almost a whisper, as though he fears the shadows may listen. He's a brooding presence, arms crossed tightly as if he can contain his own turmoil. Some things just shouldn't be consumed. The weight of his words hangs heavy, thick with the unspoken truths about our choices, our negligence. His gaze is locked on the fridge, where the remnants of yesterday sit in festering silence. I watch him, searching for the spark that used to dance in his eyes, but it's lost now, buried beneath the rubble of our shared responsibility. "Don't you see?" Clara's voice cuts through the air, crackling with urgency. "It's not just food. It's about survival. It's about dignity." Her hands fly, animated, as if she can mold the very air around her into something tangible. But even as the words tumble from her lips, I see the flicker of doubt in her eyes, a shadow lurking beneath her fervor. The memory of a child, fragile and thin, clutching a faded photograph of a meal shared long ago, fills the room like a ghost. "We can't let them down," she insists, her voice rising to a pitch that vibrates through my chest. Yet, in the silence that follows, a heartbeat echoes louder than the rest. A drum of doubt, a pulse of dread. I remember the stories we've all heard, the headlines that blare about bacteria and spoilage, the warnings that crawl under our skin. "Listeria," I murmur, feeling the chill creep up my spine. "E. coli." The words land like stones in a pond, rippling into the corners of the room, each echo morphing into images of sickness, hospital beds, and the distant cries of regret. "What if we make it worse?" David's question cuts through the air like a knife, sharp and unforgiving. The shadows seem to lean in, listening intently, waiting for the answer. His voice trembles, tinged with a fear that seeps into my bones. "What if we cause harm instead of help?" The thought lingers, thickening the atmosphere until it feels almost suffocating. Clara shakes her head as if trying to dislodge the enormity of the truth lurking in the room. "We're feeding them hope. We're nourishing their souls. Isn't that worth risking a little?" The passion in her voice is a firestorm, burning bright but threatening to consume everything in its path. Her fervor is admirable, yet I can't shake the feeling that we're standing at the edge of a precipice, peering into the abyss. I remember how we once laughed over boxes of canned goods, making jokes about expired beans and the weird, gelatinous mass clinging to the bottom of a forgotten jar. But laughter feels hollow now, replaced by the weight of uncertainty. I glance at the fridge again, and it feels alive, a creature breathing, waiting for the moment when it will unleash its horror upon the unsuspecting. And then Clara lunges forward, driven by an urgency I cannot comprehend, her fingers gripping the jar of salsa as if it were the last lifeline in a sea of despair. "We have to use it. We have to make something beautiful out of this." The desperation in her voice is palpable, a raw pulse that wraps around us like a vice. I glance at David, and I see the shadows flicker across his face, a mix of fear and helplessness, a reflection of my own turmoil. "Do you really want to risk it?" he asks, his voice strained, quivering on the edge of a precipice. "Do you want to play God with their lives?" The question hangs between us, heavy and unyielding, a truth that threatens to fracture the fragile bonds we've woven together, threads of hope and despair tightly entwined. In that moment, I realize, we are standing on the edge of a decision that holds more weight than we can fathom. Every choice, every action, has the potential to save lives or shatter them. The air thickens with the unsaid as we linger in that oppressive silence, our hearts racing to the rhythm of uncertainty. The shadows around us seem to pulse, a warning, an invitation, whispering the truth we're all too terrified to voice. Yet the refrigerator hums on, indifferent to our plight, a monstrous reminder of the risks we face. The night stretches, stretching like time itself, and as the weight of our choices looms overhead, I can't help but wonder, how far are we willing to go to preserve hope, and at what cost? The night hung thick with an oppressive silence, a weight pressing down on every window and door like the breath of a slumbering giant. The moon, a cruel spectator, cast a sickly glow over the cobblestone streets, each stone a witness to 1,000 whispered prayers, 1,000 heartbeats muffled by the shadows. A rat scurried by, its fur matted with filth, a tiny harbinger of doom. I stood there, paralyzed, heart racing, as the pungent smell of disease clawed at my throat. I wanted to scream, but nothing escaped my lips. Across the alley, Agnes knelt by her child, a fragile figure curled on the ground, skin glistening with fever. I could see the desperation etched in her face, eyes wide and frantic. "Please, God, not him," she whispered, a voice cracked and dry, like old parchment tearing in two. The boy shivered, the weight of filth wrapping around him as thick as a shroud. I remembered the whispers of the townsfolk, fingers pointing, blame casting like shadows. "It's the dirt, the waste, the rot," they said. "We've invited the curse." Filth, in all its grotesque splendor, had woven itself around us, a tapestry of despair. It was not just the garbage piling at the corners of our streets, nor the stagnant pools of water, but the very essence of our lives, clinging to our skin, swirling in our dreams like a specter that wouldn't let go. I felt it everywhere, suffocating. I felt dirty, unclean, complicit. As if I, too, had allowed the rot to seep through the cracks of our once vibrant city. Then there was Paul, the butcher, his hands forever stained with the blood of the innocent, a man whose laughter echoed in the streets even as the plague crept closer, gnawing at the fringes of our sanity. "What's a little dirt?" he'd scoff, wiping his hands on his apron, the filth mingling with the remnants of yesterday's slaughter. But the laughter faltered, a brittle sound, and I could see the fear behind his bravado. A fear that mirrored my own, that twisted like a knife in my gut. I remember the moment everything changed. It was a Tuesday. No one remembers Tuesdays. Just another day under the weight of an indifferent sky, when the first body fell. A figure crumpled in the square, lifeless, as though the ground itself had opened up to swallow him whole. People scattered, shrieks echoing against the stone, an orchestra of panic rising to a fever pitch. I remember the way Agnes clutched her child tighter, as though the boy's frail body could shield her from the grim reality surrounding us. But how could a mother protect against something that thrived in the very air we breathed? I caught Paul's eye, a silent pact forming between us. We could no longer ignore the signs. The filth was not just dirt, it was a breeding ground, an incubator for death. It thrummed beneath our feet, an unseen entity that twisted our lives into grotesque parodies of laughter and mirth. The streets that once felt alive now felt like a graveyard, a mausoleum for our hopes. "Do you see it?" Paul whispered, voice trembling. "It knows us, Agnes. It knows our sins." The shadows crawled closer, whispering secrets only the damned could understand. I felt the dread seep into my bones, cold and unyielding. Would we be next? Would our laughter be silenced, our bodies reduced to mere husks beneath the weight of our own negligence? I remember the night spent haunted by dreams of decay, of hands reaching out from the earth, grasping, pleading, begging for release. I woke up gasping, heart pounding against my chest, the memory of filth clinging to my skin like a lover turned enemy. I was trapped in a cycle of despair, choking on the stench of our own making. The walls of my mind echoed with screams, my screams, their screams, echoes of a world spiraling into chaos. Yet, amidst the darkness, there was a flicker of defiance. Agnes stood tall, her resolve like iron. "We can clean it," she declared one day, voice steady despite the tremor beneath her exterior. "If we fight together, we can push back the darkness." Her eyes burned with a fierce light, a desperate hope that made my heart ache. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe that we could scrub the filth away, that we could banish the pestilence lurking in every shadow. But the night grew colder, and the bodies in the square multiplied, each one a reminder of our failure. I watched as hope faded from Agnes's eyes, replaced by a hollow stare that mirrored the decay around us. I could see Paul's laughter devolve into a cough, a rasping sound that echoed the death knell tolling in the distance. We were all losing ourselves, being consumed by the very filth we had ignored for too long. And still, the city churned, a living entity that fed on our fears. The streets warped, twisted into a labyrinth of despair. I stumbled through the shadows, searching for answers, for solace, but found only the echo of my own heartbeat against the silence. The sun hung low in the sky, a dying ember, and I couldn't shake the feeling that time itself was slipping away, like grains of sand through my fingers. "Do you feel it?" Paul asked one evening, his voice barely above a whisper. "We're nothing but ghosts now, wandering through a world that no longer wants us." His eyes glistened with unshed tears, the weight of his words pressing down like a funeral shroud. I nodded, feeling the truth of his statement wrap around me like a noose. We were all ghosts, trapped in a cycle of despair, waiting for the final toll of the bell. In that moment, the fear became palpable, a living thing that wrapped itself around our throats, squeezing tighter with each passing day. The filth was not just a physical presence, it was an embodiment of our failure. The stench of decay mingled with our whispered fears, creating a suffocating atmosphere that refused to let us breathe. And all the while, the moon watched, a silent witness to our tragic dance with death. It hung in the sky, a ghostly reminder of the beauty we had lost, the lives we had allowed to slip through our fingers. The clock ticked, a cruel joke in the face of our impending doom, and I could only wonder how long we had left before the shadows finally swallowed us whole. Each heartbeat sounded like a drum, an ominous prelude to the darkness that awaited us. We were but pawns on a board of filth and decay, waiting for the final move that would seal our fate. The night deepened, and with it, a terrible realization settled in my chest: we were not just fighting a disease, but the very essence of our own humanity. The stench hung in the air, thick and suffocating, like a ghost that refused to fade. I remember standing there, a witness to the horror, as the shadows danced along the crumbling walls of the alley, flickering in the dim light. The ground beneath my feet was sticky with grime, a grotesque mosaic of filth and decay. In the corner, a child lay curled up, her skin mottled and feverish, eyes glazed over with a haunting emptiness. Her breath came in shuddering gasps, the kind that rattles the soul and leaves a stain on the heart. I remember feeling powerless, watching as the very air we breathed was laced with death. Lucas, a kind-hearted man with a face that had weathered countless storms, stood beside me. His hands trembled, as if they were trying to erase the horror before us. "I should have done more," he whispered, voice cracking like fragile glass. But what could he have done? We were mere spectators in a theater of despair, surrounded by mountains of refuse, a tapestry of human neglect intertwined with the cries of the sick. Each day, he woke up, donned his tattered coat, and ventured out into this grotesque landscape, fighting battles he could never win. I thought he was brave, but bravery had a way of twisting into futility in a place like this. Sophia, his sister, had been the light in our lives, a beacon of laughter amid the darkness. I remember her vibrant hair, a wild cascade of red that danced like flames in the sunlight, her laughter brightening the most desperate of days. But laughter had turned to silence, and the shadows had snuffed out her light. She had fallen ill just days before, her body succumbing to the very conditions that had claimed so many others. I could see the pain etched in Lucas's eyes, dread wound around his heart, squeezing tighter with each passing hour. The hospitals were nothing more than warehouses for the dying, overrun and overworked. Their walls had heard too many laments, echoed too many goodbyes. I remember the day they came to take Sophia away, her fevered body wrapped in a thin blanket that barely concealed her fragility. She had grasped my hand, desperation spilling from those fevered eyes. "Please," she had pleaded, "don't let this be it." But the world spun onward, indifferent and cruel, while we stood there, helpless against the tide of suffering. I could still feel the warmth of her grasp, the way it lingered like a ghost, haunting me every moment since. The sick roamed the streets like lost souls, shadows of their former selves drifting through the filth. I watched them collapse, one by one, like falling autumn leaves, so beautiful, yet so tragic. I remember the way the ground became a grave, their bodies left to rot as though they had never existed at all. And the pestilence crawled forth, an unseen monster lurking in the muck, waiting to claim its next victim. I could hear the distant wail of sirens, an eerie melody that played on repeat, a reminder of the chaos that had become our daily lives. It was as if the universe conspired against us, mocking the remnants of our hope, the flickering embers that clung to life in the darkness. They say ignorance is bliss, but in this city, knowledge offered no comfort. Each new outbreak of disease was merely a shadow extending its reach, a reminder that the unsanitary conditions only fostered more suffering. I remember sitting with Lucas on a rickety bench, our faces illuminated by the sickly glow of a street lamp, the late-night air thick with despair. "Sometimes I think about what it means to be alive," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "And I wonder if we're just waiting for our turn to be taken." I felt the weight of his words, heavy and suffocating, like the very air around us. We were all just waiting, ticking clocks in a world that had forgotten how to care. The moon hung high, a hollow sentinel gazing down on our plight, while shadows elongated and twisted around us, stretching into the depths of the alley. I could hear the faint cries of the night, the echoes of those lost to disease, their voices becoming a layered symphony of anguish. It was a sound that seeped into my bones, setting my heart racing with raw fear. Days turned into an endless cycle of dread, and I remember watching Lucas as he searched for solutions, his eyes glazed with desperation. "If only people would see," he cried, a mixture of anger and sorrow spilling forth. "They don't understand the danger of living in filth." He was right. The filth was a living entity, a grotesque symbiosis of neglect and disease, shaping our fates with each careless moment. But the people turned a blind eye, unwilling to confront the truth. They walked past the sick and the suffering, oblivious to the signs that screamed from the shadows. They had grown accustomed to the squalor, the decay becoming an unspoken part of their lives. I remember feeling the rage boil within me, a fire ignited by the injustice that surrounded us. It was as if the earth had become a graveyard, and we were the mourners cursed to witness the slow demise of a world that had forgotten how to heal. And then, one fateful day, it happened, a moment that would forever change the landscape of our existence. I watched as Sophia's breath became shallower, her body growing weaker, and in that instant, I realized she was slipping away. The shadows closed in, a blanket of despair, and I felt my heart fracture under the weight of it all. "No," I begged, my voice cracking, "not her, not now." But the universe was indifferent, a cruel puppeteer tugging at the strings of life and death. I remember the look in Lucas's eyes as he cradled Sophia in his arms, tears streaming down his cheeks like rivers of sorrow. Time seemed to stand still, the world outside frozen in a tableau of heartbreak. We were caught in the throes of a tempest, a perfect storm of grief and rage, and the unsanitary conditions that surrounded us became a symbol of our collective failures. As I stood there, watching the life slip away from her, I could feel the darkness creeping closer, enveloping us in its sinister embrace. The air grew heavy with the stench of despair, a reminder of how quickly life could spiral into chaos. In that moment, I understood the true cost of neglect, the way unsanitary conditions festered in the shadows, breeding disease and despair, consuming everything in their path. I remember the horror of that moment, the way it twisted my heart into 1,000 pieces, and I understood that we were all intertwined, caught in a web of suffering. The disease that erupted was not just a medical condition, it was a manifestation of our apathy, a reflection of our inability to face the truth that lay before us. And as the shadows continued to loom over us, I realized that the fight was far from over. The city remained a battleground, the specter of disease ever present, whispering its ominous promises as we struggled to hold on to the flickering light of hope. The confrontation was looming, both within and without, and I could feel the tension building, a storm threatening to break, unbeknownst to us, a reckoning awaited just beyond the darkness. The air is thick, almost palpable, like a weight pressing against the chest. The walls of the tenement seemed to breathe, swelling in the stifling heat, closing in on a family caught in a suffocating embrace. A child's whimper echoes, a haunting sound, a cry for help lost in a cacophony of footsteps and muffled voices. I remember the smell, the rancid tinge of spilled food and unwashed bodies mingling with the sweet facade of homemade dinners. It's the kind of scent that clings, embedding itself in your memory like a splinter. In that cramped space, 5 souls inhabit the same 2 rooms, each corner an uncharted territory where dreams collide with despair. Maria stands at the sink, her hands submerged in lukewarm, soapy water, scrubbing last night's dishes, her delicate fingers raw from the grind, the callous a testament to the struggle. She is fierce, a lioness caged, her eyes fierce yet haunted by the weight of survival. Each plate she rinses is a silent prayer, a desperate plea for a better tomorrow. I remember the way she sways slightly, lost in thought, her worn-out shoes barely holding together, a symbol of her relentless fight. And then there's Thomas, her younger brother, whose laughter pierces through the tension like the sun breaking a stormy sky. At 8 years old, he's a spark in the shadows, running through the cramped living room, dodging stacks of newspapers that serve as both walls and memories. His laughter is pure, a song that begs to be sung louder, yet it's tainted by the knowledge of their reality. The world outside is a dark abyss, full of promises never kept, jobs that slip through fingers like sand. He wants to be a firefighter, to rescue people from blazing infernos, but here, in this hell of overcrowded existence, the only flames he sees are the flickering candles on the table. "Why can't we have a real home, Maria?" he whispers one night, the question hanging in the air like smoke from a dying fire. Her heart aches at the query, not knowing how to explain the insurmountable barriers that cage them like fragile birds. She wants to shield him from the world, to wrap him in warmth and love, but she knows it's not enough. The sheets are thin, the walls papered with grime and despair. "We make it home," she replies, forcing a smile. "Home is where we are together." But the truth lingers, a ghost in the room that neither can shake off, the truth that home is a word that has lost its meaning. As the night deepens, shadows dance on the walls, clawing at the edges of sanity, whispering secrets of lost dreams. I remember the voices that seep through the thin walls, neighbors arguing, children crying, a baby wailing. It's a symphony of sorrow, a reminder that their suffering is not solitary. Yet, in that sea of humanity, Maria feels alone. The burden of responsibility rests heavily on her shoulders, an anchor that pulls her deeper into the murky waters of despair. Her mother, bedridden and fading like an old photograph, doesn't know how to make it better. Her father left, a ghost more tangible than the fading light. As dawn breaks, the light filters through the grime-streaked window, illuminating the tiny space in a muted glow. Thomas stirs first, the soft rustle of his sheets like a songbird trying to take flight. He pads across the cold, uneven floor to where Maria sits, her face a mask of exhaustion. "Can we go outside today?" he asks, his voice still thick with sleep. But what lies beyond the door? A street littered with broken dreams. A world that feels too big, too cold, too indifferent. "Not today," she replies, her voice cracking like the walls around them. "We have to wait." The words hang in the air, heavy with disappointment, a familiar refrain that echoes through their lives. And then the silence returns, stretching and folding over them like a blanket, the kind that suffocates. The clock ticks, each second a reminder of their stagnant existence. I remember the sound of it, relentless and cruel, as if time itself mocks their struggle, taunts their dreams. Maria's thoughts spiral, a tempest of worries clashing like the storm outside. What if the landlord comes? What if they're found out? She glances at the ceiling, the stains like darkened clouds foreboding something worse than yesterday's disappointments. It's then that the confrontation comes. The door slams open, the landlord's shadow looming large, a dark figure that fills the doorway like a storm ready to unleash its fury. "You're late," he growls, his voice a low rumble that reverberates through the cramped space. "You know the rules." Maria's heart races, each pounding beat a drumroll heralding disaster. "I'll get it," she stammers, but her voice is small, withering under the weight of his gaze. Thomas watches wide-eyed, the fear in his chest tightening like a vice. "Get out," he shouts, a child's defiance echoing in a world that has stripped him of his innocence. But that bravado is swallowed by the landlord's sneer, a twisted grin revealing the monstrous nature of power. "You think you can stand up to me," he barks, and in that moment, the walls close in even tighter, the air thinning like a noose around their necks. I remember the way the light flickered, shadows stretching and contorting, the room turning into a battleground of emotions, fear, desperation, and a flicker of hope. Maria rises, defiance igniting a fire in her gut. "You don't own us," she says, the words tasting like ash in her mouth. "We're more than this." But the warmth of her spirit dances on the edge of despair, ready to be extinguished at any moment. The landlord chuckles, a sound that sends shivers down her spine, a chill that wraps around her heart. "You think you're brave," he hisses, "look around. This will always be your cage." And in that instant, something shifts. The air hangs heavy with the promise of change, the kind that comes with a cost. Maria's resolve hardens. She knows that the battle is far from over. This is not just about a roof over their heads anymore, it's about reclaiming their lives from the shadows that threaten to swallow them whole. I remember the echoes of Thomas's laughter, a memory flickering like a dying flame. He pulls at her hand, urging her forward, compelling her to stand tall in the face of the storm. Together, he whispers, a mantra against the inevitable tide of despair. Together, they are a force. And as the confrontation unfolds, the struggle for their home morphs into a fight for their very souls, echoing through the alleys of overcrowded dreams and filthy dwellings, where hope clings to existence like fragile cobwebs in the corners of their lives, waiting for the dawn to break. The chill of dawn creeps through the narrow cracks of the tenement walls, a ghostly finger sliding between worn stones, lingering in the air like the last breath of a forgotten dream. I can hear them, cries that pierce the silence, a mother's wails, a child's desperate sobs, echoing through the damp corridors. It is a cacophony of survival, and it resonates within the pit of my stomach, a reminder of the fragility of life in this crumbling sanctuary. I stand still, heart hammering, as if the very walls are whispering the secrets of despair and hope, woven together in a tapestry of suffering. Elena's hands tremble as she clutches the frayed edges of her apron, the fabric a battlefield of stains and memories. Each mark tells a story, a reminder of the last supper shared in the dim light of their shared room, a bowl of porridge, thin and watery, the remnants of dreams boiled down to nothing but grit. I remember, she murmurs, her voice a fragile thread, easily snapped. I remember when we had a real meal. Her gaze flickers to the ceiling, the shadows dancing like phantoms, mocking her hunger. The child, Marek, is too young to understand the weight of her words, yet he feels it, burdened by the silence that sits between them like a ghost. The stench of unwashed bodies clings to the air, a thick fog of decay and desperation. A rat scurries across the floor, darting between splintered floorboards, seeking food amidst the refuse of lives lived in squalor. I catch a glimpse of it, and my stomach turns. I remember my own home, a world of soft sheets and warm meals, lost to the cruel tides of time. But here, in this tenement, hope is a fleeting shadow, slipping through fingers too worn to capture it. Then there's Thomas, his spirit is battered, but not yet broken. A labor with scars etched deep into his skin, he returns each evening cloaked in a shroud of exhaustion. The toll of work weighs heavily upon his shoulders, and yet, he strives for balance, a precarious tightrope walk between despair and determination. They bath once a year, he chuckles grimly, his voice a rasping whisper. So yeah, romance was earthy. The humor is dark, a lifeline thrown in the boiling sea of futility. Thomas works the docks, hauling burdens heavier than his dreams, yet even the stench of salt and sweat is preferable to the stench of hopelessness that permeates their home. I watch as he tends to Marek, his rough hand surprisingly gentle, a flicker of warmth in a world so cold. You'll be a knight one day, he tells the boy, eyes glimmering with an ember of dreams unfulfilled. A knight, with shining armor. But the armor is rusted, the knight a mere figment conjured from the ashes of their reality. Will I? Marek asks, innocence painted on his face, a canvas untouched by the brush of despair. His eyes sparkle with a curiosity that pierces the fog of hopelessness, yet I see the flicker of doubt. It's there, hovering like a spectre. The tenements are tombs of potential, where dreams come to die, and the air is thick with the weight of unfulfilled promises. Across the hall, a neighbor's cough rattles through the walls, a haunting sound that echoes the inevitability of mortality. The plague lurks around every corner, a creeping shadow poised to claim yet another soul. I remember tales of families swept away, leaving only echoes behind, whispers of laughter that fade like flickering candles in the night. It's a reminder that life here is fragile, as if it teeters on the edge of a knife, waiting for the inevitable fall. Every time the clock strikes, remember this, Elena whispers, clutching Marek closer, her breath warm against his skin. Time is a thief, taking what we hold dear. I can see it, her fear, raw and palpable, it wraps around me like a shroud, a constant reminder of the ticking seconds that slip through their fingers like grains of sand. Elena's dreams are woven from the fabric of the sky, threads of hope scattered across the iron clouds. She dreams of gardens, of flowers blooming amidst the chaos, a sanctuary where sunlight can kiss her skin, where Marek can run free, unburdened by the weight of existence. But here, the only thing that blooms is the spirit of survival, a wildflower that pushes through cracks in the stone, defiant, yet achingly fragile. In the heart of the tenement, a moment of stillness settles. I feel it pulse like a heartbeat, every breath suspended in anticipation. The darkness envelops us, thick and heavy, curling around our throats, squeezing tighter with each passing second. It is suffocating, yet within it lies a flicker of rebellion, a yearning for something more than this grim existence. Elena looks at Thomas, their eyes locking in a moment of understanding, a silent pact forged in the fire of their shared struggles. "We will not let the darkness claim us," she vows, her voice a whisper, yet imbued with a fierce resolve that could slice through the haze. But the walls, they listen. They watch. They are witnesses to the dreams that flicker and fade, to the love that is both a balm and a burden. I can feel the weight of history in this place, a tapestry woven with pain, laughter, and the echo of laughter long lost. And then, a scream shatters the night, a raw sound that slices through the silence like a knife. It's a cry of terror, of desperation, an echo of the lives lived here, a warning of what lurks just beyond the fragile veil of hope. The darkness stirs, and in that moment, I know this is not just a tenement, it is a crucible of souls, a place where shadows dance and light flickers, teetering on the precipice of oblivion. Time stretches, expands, compressing moments into shards of glass, each one capable of cutting deep. The air is thick with a tension that crackles like lightning, and as I stand among them, I feel it too, the pulse of life, of longing, of dreams intertwined with despair. This is a place where every heartbeat tells a story, where every breath is a prayer whispered into the void. And as the scream fades, swallowed by the night, I am left with a sense of unease, a question that hangs heavy in the air: what will remain when the darkness finally claims its due?